The porch light was still on when the Harlan family vanished in the town of Marshall, Michigan, population 8,112. Christmas Eve 2007 arrived with a blizzard that dumped over 14 inches of snow across Calhoun County. At 9:32 p.m., their neighbor, Irene Watts, stood in her kitchen, looking out the window as the Harlan's silver minivan pulled away from the parking lot of St. Mary's Church, its headlights sweeping long across the white snow. The 6 family members inside had just left the Christmas service, the kids still wearing thick coats and red knit hats made by their mother. Watts watched the vehicle's lights fade at the turnoff, leading to the Marshall Foundry industrial area, where cold smoke still rose from the rusted smokestacks. The minivan's faint red taillights were the last lights she saw that night. What happened in the next 3 hours would haunt Marshall for the 13 years that followed. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Michigan, winter 2007, a frigid atmosphere enveloped the Midwestern towns as the wave of industrial crisis spread. Factories shut down one after another, production lines halted, and the once proud industrial areas of the state became rusted steel hulks, standing alone in the snow. In Marshall, a small town in Calhoun County, residents' lives were tied to the now extinguished factories. The Marshall Foundry, which had produced auto parts for half a century, had been abandoned since 2001 after its parent company went bankrupt. The road to the factory site was long and deserted, with old iron gates locked tight, brick walls crumbling in sections, and inside only blackened steel frames and snow-covered concrete slabs. The town still moved slowly in the cold, family diners sparsely populated, roadside stores hanging winter sale signs, and St. Mary's Church, one of the few places retaining community warmth. The Harlan family lived in a neighborhood on the south side of Marshall, near Industrial Drive. Martha Harlan, 46, worked part-time at the local grocery store. Her daughter Danielle, 17, was a senior in high school, and 4 young grandchildren she cared for after her eldest son moved away. Their small house was lit up every evening, decorated with simple but neat Christmas lights, and the silver minivan parked in front was the family's most valuable remaining possession. On December 21st, the town bustled with holiday preparation. That evening, snow fell heavily, golden lights casting onto the white mist from St. Mary's Church, where an early Christmas service was held. The Harlan family arrived early, bringing baked goods and a few small wrapped gifts. After the service, they said goodbye to friends, received season's greetings, and got into their vehicle to head home. A few people at the church exit saw their silver minivan turn left onto the road, leading to the Marshall Foundry, an abandoned dead-end route connecting to the old industrial area where almost no one went after the factory closed. That was the last image the town had of them. The night passed in silence, snow falling relentlessly. The next morning, the Harlan house lights were still on, the dining table untouched, the phone ringing with no answer. Relatives came to check, knocked with no response, found the door unlocked, and everything inside exactly as they had left it. The car was no longer in the garage, and tire tracks in front of the porch were completely covered by snow. When hope faded that they had just gone somewhere overnight, relatives called the police. The report reached the Marshall Police Department early that morning, as snow still fell and fog blanketed the main road into the neighborhood. Sheriff Harold Benson, who directly handled missing persons cases in Calhoun County, arrived at the scene immediately with 2 officers. The Harlan family's small house sat in the quiet neighborhood, its roof blanketed in snow, the living room light faintly glowing through the curtains. Benson pushed open the door, the wooden floor cold underfoot, the air inside thick with the smell of cooled food and chill. He checked each room. The kids' beds were neatly made, toys left in place. Martha's coat hung on the hook, shoes neatly lined up by the door, no personal items missing. The windows, back door, and front door showed no signs of forced entry. In the kitchen, the previous night's unfinished meal remained, dishes unwashed, a pot of water on the stove gone cold. All signs indicated the family had left briefly, possibly intending to return. Benson requested the forensics team to photograph, collect basic samples, and document the scene. He walked around the house once, noting in his notebook, no signs of struggle, no missing property, family vehicle, not in garage. In the living room, the landline phone blinked with 3 missed calls from the night before. Benson pressed hold to check. All 3 were from the same number, Martha's cousin, who reported them missing that morning. On Martha's desk was a pocket calendar with December 21st circled in red, noting St. Mary's Sesh, 7 p.m. He looked out the window frame. White snow covered the road to the main street, all tire tracks gone. After documenting the scene, Benson questioned the neighbors. A woman across the street said around 8 o'clock the previous evening, she saw vehicle lights through her window and thought the Harlans had returned. But when she looked again, there was only darkness and falling snow. Another confirmed hearing no engines or voices all night. The statements were carefully recorded, with nothing unusual except the house lights staying on until morning. Based on the initial inspection, Benson classified it as an unexplained missing persons case with no signs of crime. He opened an official file, assigning case number missing person case M0744821, listing the 6 victims by age order, noting status silver minivan, location unknown. That same morning, he contacted the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office and Battle Creek PD to share data and request search coordination. Benson entered the vehicle details into Michigan's alert system, sending descriptions to all patrol units and checkpoints along Interstate 94. With no evidence of abduction or crime, the Amber Alert process was not activated, but a statewide internal search bulletin was issued. Meanwhile, gas stations, convenience stores, and parking lots in the area were asked to review any stored camera footage. Benson returned to headquarters, compiling all data gathered that day, witness statements, scene photos, and recent contact phone lists. He marked key timelines in red ink: the time they left St. Mary's, the window when neighbors saw the vehicle lights, and the first unanswered call. Everything aligned with 7:30 to 8 p.m., with no data afterward. In his duty log, he wrote the first entry, family of 6, missing after leaving church, no signs of violence. Priority 1. As Benson stepped out of the Harlan house, snow had piled thicker, wind whipping cold against his face. He stood on the porch steps looking down the street, only dim yellow streetlights visible through the mist. All traces of the previous night had been erased, leaving a complete void, the starting point of a disappearance no one could explain. That afternoon, right after completing the initial file, Benson deployed the first patrol teams along the route where the Harlan family was last seen. Snow fell heavier, the leaden sky heavy, visibility limited to just a few dozen yards. The road from St. Mary's Church to the south neighborhood wasn't long, but it had several small turnoffs leading to outlying areas where old industrial sites were scattered. 3 patrol cars were assigned to split the main route and 2 side paths, using the state's GPS system to mark each checked area. Along both sides of the road, leaning utility poles, snow clinging white to signs and rusted fences. The desolate scene made searching grueling, all tire tracks erased by fresh snow. The first team swept the main road from the church to the highway, finding no debris or skid marks. The second team entered the old eastern neighborhood, where abandoned houses interspersed with long-closed warehouses. There they noted a few black streaks on the road, but determined them to be from melted ice, mixed with old machine oil. The third team, led by Lieutenant Peters, headed southwest along Industrial Drive toward the Marshall Foundry. Snow was thicker in this area. Patrol cars moving slowly, headlights dim in the fog. As they neared the gate of the abandoned factory complex, the 2-meter-high iron fence snow-covered, the no trespassing sign swaying in the wind. Inside, the factory buildings loomed in darkness, only a few steel frames standing amid the white expanse. Peters stopped the vehicle, shone a flashlight along the entrance, noticing a flat, compressed snow strip extending several meters, possibly from a light vehicle or pedestrian, but not clear enough to determine direction. He marked the location and radioed back requesting Benson come check it personally. About an hour later, Benson arrived with the forensics team. They walked along the fence, noting the compressed snow was not continuous and could have formed naturally from wind. Still, the distance from there to the church was just over 3 miles, in the exact direction witnesses saw the Harlan vehicle turn. Benson ordered photos, marked it on the search map, and designated the Marshall Foundry as a priority area for detailed sweeping the next day. As they left the area, he paused, looking through the iron gate, where rows of gray-black factory buildings stretched in the snow. The scene evoked an eerie feeling, the industrial site abandoned since 2001, far from residential areas. No clear reason for anyone to go there at night. He noted in his notebook, Foundry, priority inspection. On the way back, the internal radio crackled with reports from other teams. The entire route around Marshall yielded no matching vehicle or evidence. No signals of vehicles leaving the area that night. No accident reports on main traffic routes. Battle Creek checkpoints confirmed no vehicles matching the description within a 10-mile radius. Benson created an area map, circling the entire route from the church to the foundry in red, noting most likely path. He instructed teams to preserve the status quo, not disturbing snow in the factory area until official survey orders. As dusk fell, patrol vehicles returned to the station, tires leaving faint tracks on thin ice. Benson stood outside, looking at the map spread on the car hood, red markers scattered in an arc, all stopping at the edge of Marshall Foundry. He underlined that phrase twice, then closed the notebook and ordered the area sealed overnight. In the internal log, he wrote briefly, "Search route completed. No evidence, no witnesses. Foundry industrial area identified as next examination zone." As the last patrol team left the scene, snow began falling heavily again, covering tire tracks and all fresh markers, leaving a smooth white expanse with nothing but the wind whistling through the abandoned factory buildings. The next morning, as snow let up temporarily and visibility improved, Benson officially launched the largest search operation Marshall had ever conducted. The Marshall Foundry was designated the center of the search zone, with a 10-mile radius around it. The Michigan State Police dispatched 3 support units, including a K-9 team and 2 infrared camera-equipped search helicopters. Local rescue groups, firefighters, and over 30 volunteers were mobilized, divided into 7 teams, each assigned a specific area per the map Benson had hand-drawn the night before. The forensics team set up a temporary command tent near the foundry gate, using the factory's abandoned parking lot as a staging area. Temperatures remained below freezing, wind from the Kalamazoo River, bringing moisture that caused thin snow layers to melt then refreeze quickly. Roads around the industrial area were marked with colored flags, each route checked by both personnel and working dogs. Helicopters began sweeping the area from above, circling the factory buildings and thin woods behind, transmitting live footage to the command center. Whenever a compressed snow patch or discolored ground was spotted, ground teams were dispatched immediately. Throughout the morning, no clear results emerged. Suspicious marks were identified as animal tracks or remnants from old construction equipment. Around noon, the K-9 team detected an odd scent at the edge of Building 4, but quickly lost it when the wind shifted. Benson marked the location, recorded coordinates, and ordered the search expanded to the small western woods. Over 3 hours later, teams returned reporting no vehicle, no personal items, no ground disturbance signs. A volunteer reported seeing something shiny under ice in a drainage ditch by the industrial road. But inspection revealed only a rusted metal fragment from old equipment. By late afternoon, the second helicopter swept the road connecting the foundry to the neighborhood, infrared cameras detecting no unusual heat signatures. The entire area was marked negative. Rescue teams suggested halting operations as dusk approached, as dropping temperatures increased equipment freeze risk. Benson agreed, but required all checked locations to be staked with wooden posts and GPS coordinates recorded to avoid oversights. At the command center, The area map was pinned to a large board, each search zone tagged with a status note. As teams returned, they submitted reports, photos, and GPS logs. No signs indicated the vehicle's or 6 missing persons' direction. The K-9 team finally returned at twilight, dogs exhausted, fur matted with snow. Benson reviewed all data, requesting the analysis team cross-reference with prior year maps to check for any unchecked side paths. An officer suggested inspecting the southern rail area due to an old shortcut to the foundry, but new maps showed it fenced off since 2005. Outside, wind howled stronger, exhaust plumes from rescue vehicles billowing white in the darkness. The radio communication system crackled continuously, teams reporting completed assignments in their zones. All had the same result, no suspicious traces found. When the command tent clock struck 6 p.m., Benson ordered a full operational pause to preserve personnel and equipment, and requested a list of all searched and unapproached areas. He looked at the map before him, red marker circles spreading like a web around the foundry, but all empty. In his notes, he wrote a brief summary: December 23, 2007, large-scale search completed. No vehicle, no evidence, no witnesses. After teams withdrew, the industrial area sank into darkness, only a few wooden stakes protruding from thick snow, and faint red flashing lights from patrol cars, reflecting in the cold wind. The next morning, as search teams returned to the Marshall Foundry area to complete the final sweep, a Michigan State Police forensics team was dispatched to thoroughly examine Building 4, where the K-9 team had temporarily marked a spot the previous day due to an odd scent. Snow in the area had been preliminarily cleared for easier movement, weak sunlight reflecting off the ice surface, giving everything a hazy silver sheen. Lead technician, Lieutenant Hensley, and 3 subordinates walked along the north wall of the building. As they neared the concrete pad against the wall corner, they noticed a dark strip extending nearly 4 meters amid the white snow patches. Using small shovels to scrape the surface snow, the concrete emerged clearer, scorched cement with black smoke streaks running from the wall edge outward, a strong fuel smell thick in the air. Hensley knelt, lightly touched the surface with gloved hands, and noted it was cooler than the surroundings, indicating a possible small fire or fuel leak had occurred. He called Benson to the scene and set up temporary caution tape barriers. When Benson arrived, wind blew hard, whipping dry snow flurries across the factory floor. He examined the dark streak, frowning as the gasoline smell grew stronger near the cracked corner. Hensley quickly presented preliminary findings, assessing the fire likely occurred days or even weeks ago, as the concrete structure remained intact without collapse. Benson ordered full area photos, coordinate marking, then sample collection of soil, ash and snow from 3 spots against the wall, center of the burn mark, and outer edge. Each sample went into separate preservation bags, labeled with time, location, and collector's signature. A technician used a gas detector to check hydrocarbon levels in the air, readings fluctuating slightly but above average background. At 5 meters distance, they spotted a few small black spots speckled on the ice, possibly oil residue. Hensley documented everything, requesting no vehicles pass through the area until analysis was complete. The forensics team took high-resolution panoramic photos plus close-ups of each detail. In the preliminary scene report, Benson noted clearly, unexplained burn marks discovered at Building 4, distinct fuel odor, no ignition source present. He signed confirmation, then directed mobile fencing to seal the area, assigning a patrol unit to guard it overnight to preserve the scene. As the forensics team withdrew, Benson circled the factory building once more. He noticed the east wall section suited up to half a meter high, distinct from the rest. The concrete surface there had many small cracks, possibly from heat impact. A young technician lightly scraped ice from the wall, revealing thin soot underneath, indicating the fire had burned long enough to produce smoke. Benson ordered additional wall ash samples, adding to the supplementary file. All were placed in sealed preservation boxes for transport to the Lansing lab that day. Wind grew stronger, scattering ice chips mixed with black ash, dusting the bright protective suits. Benson stood looking at the patchy black scorch marks on the factory floor. Sensing this area had been the focus of something unusual, though no concrete evidence supported the hunch, he added a final note in his notebook. Gasoline smell still distinct despite low temperatures, suspect localized fire, origin undetermined. Before leaving the foundry, Benson reminded Hensley to send the preliminary report that day and ensure samples reached the analysis lab safely. Building 4 was fully sealed, posted with forensic scene, authorized personnel only signs. As patrol vehicles departed, yellow barriers reflected flashing red lights on the white snow, cordoning off a silent empty lot, where nothing remained but faint gasoline scent and black smoke stains clinging to the cold wall of the abandoned factory. After workshop number 4 was sealed off and the samples were transferred to Lansing, Benson requested the administrative department to review all old personnel records from Marshall Foundry to determine who still had access to the factory premises. Data archived from 2001 showed a list of 14 maintenance employees who had been issued master keys, of which only 2 were still alive in Marshall, one of whom was Robert Carr, 42 years old, who had previously been in charge of the electrical and fuel systems before the plant closed. According to the records, Carr lived on the southern edge of town, about 5 miles from the foundry, and currently worked freelance as a mechanic. When summoned to the Marshall police station to assist with the investigation, he arrived in oil-stained work clothes, with his right hand wrapped in gauze. Benson personally interrogated him in a small conference room, recording the entire session. Carr stated that on the evening of December 21st, he was at workshop number 4 to check the backup generator, which he had been hired to start up periodically, once a month for the new property owner, who was negotiating the sale of the factory premises. He explained that around early evening, while testing the startup, a spark from the old wiring system caused a minor burn on his hand. He bandaged it himself with gauze at home and did not go to the hospital. When Benson asked why he was at the factory so late, Carr explained that he wanted to get it done before the holiday break, as the weather forecast predicted heavy snow the next day, and he feared he wouldn't be able to get around. He insisted he was only there for about an hour before leaving, did not encounter anyone else, and did not see any vehicles or people in the area. Regarding the fuel smell and burn marks discovered, Carr said there were still a few old machine oil drums in the storage area that might have leaked when he started the generator. He emphasized that he saw no fire, only heard a small pop and then smoke coming from the filter. Benson asked him to describe his movements and the generator's location again. Carr pointed to the schematic, correctly identifying the area of workshop number 4, where technicians had found the burn marks. When asked about the keys, he pulled a bundle of 3 from his pocket, one of which matched the old foundry key sample, with the head engraved with the number F4. He said he never returned it because the previous owner never asked for it, and he was still occasionally called in to check the electrical systems. Benson had the keys retained as temporary evidence and took photos of Carr's bandaged hand for the records. The injury was not serious, but clearly showed signs of an old burn, with blistered skin that had scabbed over. After the interrogation, Carr was asked to sign the witness statement and surrender his ID. He was cooperative and did not object. Before leaving the station, he reiterated that he had nothing to do with the disappearance and expressed willingness to assist in the search if needed. Benson observed his calm demeanor as he walked out the door, showing no signs of anxiety or evasion, but in the internal report, he noted, Carr, individual with legitimate access to foundry premises, present at the time of the disappearance, with an injury matching the time frame. Place on primary witness list. He ordered the technical department to check Carr's phone calls on December 21st and 22 to determine signal locations. Preliminary results showed his phone active in the foundry area from 6:45 p.m. to 8:05 p.m. on December 21st, matching the time frame when a witness saw the Harlan family's vehicle turning in that direction. The data was archived, but no conclusions were drawn. Benson requested preservation of the data records and sent a follow-up request to verify the current property owner of Marshall Foundry to check the validity of the statement. Late that afternoon, he sat in his office reviewing the entire interrogation transcript along with crime scene photos. The final note added to the case file page read, "Carr, Robert, confirmed presence at workshop number 4 on evening of 12/21. Fuel smell and burn marks match witness's work area. No criminal indicators detected but further monitoring required." Outside, snow began falling again, white flakes covering the steps of the police station. Benson closed the file, placed it on the growing stack of documents, realizing that the Harlan family disappearance might no longer be a simple matter. The next morning, as reports of Robert Carr's statement were filed, Benson shifted his focus to those around the Harlan home. He instructed the domestic investigation team to re-review the list of immediate neighbors, focusing on those who had contact with the family before the disappearance. Among them, the name Ethan Granger was specially flagged. Ethan, 29 years old, lived 3 houses away and worked at a repair shop north of town. He was the last person seen talking to Martha Harlan on the afternoon of December 21st, according to a witness from the same neighborhood. Local records showed Ethan was single, with no criminal record, and had lived quietly in town since childhood. When invited to the police station to provide information, he arrived neatly dressed, calm in demeanor, and cooperative. In the initial questioning, Benson asked about his relationship with the Harlan family. Ethan said he had known Martha for years because he often helped her with minor household repairs. He occasionally drove Danielle, her daughter, to school when their car was broken. He last spoke to them around 5 p.m. on the day of the disappearance, while clearing snow in front of his house. Martha stopped to say hello, mentioned they were going to church for the Christmas service, and Danielle promised to return a toolkit he had lent her to fix a kitchen light. After that, they got in the car and left, and he did not see them again. When Benson asked if there was anything unusual in their demeanor, Ethan said no, everything was normal. He described them as cheerful, with the children excited about the service, and Martha mentioning she would stop by the industrial area to drop something off for someone before heading home, though she did not specify who. Benson noted this detail because it matched the direction provided by the witness at the church. When asked about his own movements that evening, Ethan said he stayed home watching TV and went to bed before 9, without leaving the neighborhood. He allowed them to cross-check his mobile phone location data, which showed the device stationary at his home throughout the evening, consistent with his statement. However, Benson wanted to clarify Ethan's relationship with Danielle further, as several neighbor reports mentioned they were closer than usual. Ethan admitted to helping Danielle with homework and car repairs, but denied any romantic involvement. He said, "She's 12 years younger than me. I see her like a little sister." Benson made no comment, only recording the response verbatim. At the end of the session, he asked Ethan to sign the statement and informed him they might contact him for more information. After he left the room, Benson reviewed the entire transcript. Ethan's statement was logical, but his knowledge of the detail about stopping by the industrial area made him consider the possibility that he knew more than he let on. He ordered a surveillance team to discreetly monitor Ethan's activities over the next few days and requested extraction of traffic camera footage on the route connecting the neighborhood to St. Mary's Church to check for any other vehicles between 7 and 8 p.m. In the internal report, Benson clearly noted, Ethan Granger, closest neighbor, last contact with victim, familiar relationship, no signs of violence, statement requires further verification. He marked his name on the additional monitoring list with a red ink note. Informant may hold key details. That afternoon, an officer was sent to the garage where Ethan worked to check his routine and work hours. The garage owner confirmed Ethan was there all morning on December 21st, clocked out at 4:30, and went home as he said. Background checks showed no criminal history or administrative violations. Benson temporarily noted his status as cooperative witness, no contradictions detected, but kept his name on the monitoring list as a precaution. As he closed the notebook, snow fell again outside, the wind sweeping through the office window, carrying a biting chill and gloom. Inside, Fluorescent lights cast a blue glow on the desk, reflecting off the file with the newly added line. Ethan Granger, last neighbor to speak with the Harlan family. 2 days after the interrogation, on Benson's orders, the investigation team returned to the southern Marshall neighborhood for a comprehensive search around Ethan Granger's home. The decision came after the technical team completed reviewing traffic data, but still found no trace of the silver minivan's movements, leading Benson to believe every small detail in this area needed re-examination. When the team arrived, Ethan was home, still in his garage uniform, and remained calm when asked to cooperate with the search. He signed the consent form saying, "I've got nothing to hide." His garage was detached from the main house, an old gray-painted wooden structure, cluttered inside with all sorts of mechanical tools, oil cans, batteries, and a few worn tires. The smell of gasoline and damp metal mingled, with light from fluorescent tubes reflecting off the cold concrete floor. 2 officers began video recording the entire space, numbering each search area. On a wooden table near the door, they found a small folding knife with a metal handle, blade folded shut, lightly dusted. When Benson was called over, he asked Ethan about its origin. He said it was a birthday gift from years ago, used for cutting wires or car repairs, and he couldn't remember who gave it to him. Benson signaled a technician to glove up, pick up the knife, and place it in a sealed evidence bag labeled Suspect Item 8A. Aside from this, no other suspicious items were found in the garage, no bloodstains, no unfamiliar clothing, no tire marks other than his own. They also checked the outdoor trash bin, which contained only oil rags and part casings. In the small loft above, a few cardboard boxes held old tools and car warranty files, labeled by year. Benson carefully inspected every corner, noting in his log, "Granger Garage. Orderly, no signs of struggle." When questioned about the knife, Ethan remained calm, saying he hadn't used it in a long time and wasn't even sure if it was still sharp. Benson made no comment, only instructing the technical team to continue examining the scene with ultraviolet light for organic traces, with completely negative results. Outside, winter winds blew hard, rattling the garage door, the clash of metal echoing in the cold air. Benson ordered overall photos taken, all samples packaged, with the folding knife prioritized for DNA and fingerprint analysis. As the technical team left, Ethan stood at the driveway, hands in his pockets, asking no further questions, just watching the police vehicles depart the neighborhood. At the station, the knife sample was handed over to the Lansing Technical Lab with a detailed description report, 8-centimeter steel blade, with rust spots and fine dust patches, no signs of recent sharpening. Waiting for results took nearly a week due to the state's high volume of test samples. In the meantime, Benson continued reviewing Ethan's personal records, confirming no criminal history, clean credit, no debts, and no personal conflicts with any Harlan family members. When the analysis results arrived, the technical report clearly stated, no DNA detected, no biological traces, no foreign fingerprints, no notable organic residue. In other words, the knife was completely clean. Benson read it, folded the result sheet, and placed it in the case file, feeling both relieved and frustrated. The one clue he hoped would open a new lead held no evidentiary value. In the daily summary, he noted, Evidence 8A folding knife, no DNA, no direct link to the case. However, Benson still kept the item in sealed storage due to its unclear origin. That evening, alone in his office, he reopened the Marshall map, looking at the series of red markers for searched areas and adding a small mark at Ethan's property, simply as a reminder that not everything was clear. Outside, snow began falling again, covering the tire tracks left by the investigation team that morning. In the room, a yellow lamp cast light on the updated file page, with Benson's final line written in blue ink. Ethan Granger, residence and garage search completed. No physical evidence found. Folding knife retained for additional monitoring. 3 days after all samples were sent out, Benson received notification from the Lansing Technical Lab that initial analysis results were complete. The report, over 10 pages long, was sent electronically with the original sealed and delivered. He opened the document on his desk, checking each item. The fuel sample collected from workshop number 4 was analyzed via gas chromatography, revealing a mixture of gasoline, machine oil, and industrial impurities, with no traces of human DNA or any biological proteins. Burn residue indicated low heat from a short-duration fire, possibly from a fuel leak, not an intentional ignition source. The accompanying soil and snow samples showed no signs of hemoglobin or organic matter, proving no human blood was present in the area during the fire. The analysts concluded, no criminal elements identified from the scene. Attached was a forensic specialist's note. Heavy fuel odor likely from old machine oil or long-stored preservatives. Benson read each line carefully, pausing at the section Sample 8A folding knife. The results stated, no foreign fingerprints detected, no DNA, no biological traces, no adhered organic matter. An appendix with electron microscope images showed the blade surface oxidized over time, with old rust layers covering the cutting edge, proving the item had not been used recently. Both sample types, fuel and knife, reached the same conclusion, no criminal elements. Benson leaned back in his chair, looking out the window where snow still fell lightly. All efforts over the past 2 weeks led to the same empty conclusion. He carefully reorganized the report pages, attached them to the case file, then called Lieutenant Hensley in Lansing to confirm details. Over the line, Hensley affirmed the results had been double-checked with no errors. He added that the fuel's chemical structure indicated industrial machine oil, not consumer vehicle gasoline, matching Robert Carr's statement about starting the backup generator. Benson noted this, marking it under witness statement verification match. However, the lack of criminal evidence stalled the case. In the briefing room, he presented briefly to the investigation team. Lab report shows no criminal indicators, no DNA, no blood, no intentional burn marks. The room fell silent, everyone understanding the only remaining path was to continue searching for the vehicle. Benson requested the Foundry area remain under surveillance until additional environmental analysis results came from Lansing. He also had unused ash samples preserved for potential reanalysis if needed. As the technical team left, Benson stayed to review every line in the conclusion section. It was all cold and factual, leaving no room for speculation or intuition. No human DNA found in any samples, no signs of violence. Ignition source undetermined. He closed the document, placed it on the growing file stack, then opened his logbook and wrote, Lansing report. Initial results, no criminal elements detected. Awaiting next direction. Outside, the afternoon turned gray, wind rattling the thin curtains through the window. In the quiet room, Benson stared at the wall map strip with dozens of red markers for checked areas, feeling as if all of Marshall was closing in around an invisible void. The most anticipated evidence, the folding knife and burn smell, proved meaningless. He leaned back in his chair, adding a final line in blue ink. December 29, 2007. Lansing Lab Report. No DNA, no evidence confirming criminal activity. Continue monitoring. 10 days after receiving the lab report from Lansing, the entire investigation activity in Marshall slowed down. Snow fell continuously throughout the week, blanketing the entire Foundry area and suburban roads, making movement nearly impossible. Nighttime temperatures dropped below 12 degrees below zero, with winds from Lake Michigan carrying skin-cutting cold moisture. Benson maintained minimal patrol forces, mainly to monitor the sealed area and ensure no unauthorized entry. Daily reports from patrol teams all recorded the same line. No changes to scene, no new traces found. Efforts to locate the Harlan family's vehicle also hit a dead end. State traffic system data showed no records of the silver minivan leaving the area during the suspected time frame. Gas stations and stores along Interstate 94 were asked to recheck footage, but most had been overwritten due to elapsed time. Benson contacted Michigan State Police for additional manpower, but the response was that weather was too severe for further deployment. He realized everything possible in the emergency phase had been done. At the morning meeting on January 2, 2008, at the Marshall Police Station, he read the comprehensive report to the investigation team. His voice was even and low, emotionless. No vehicle located, no witnesses, no criminal evidence. Weather conditions prevent expanded search. The room was silent, only the sound of wind whistling through the window frames. He decided to temporarily suspend all field operations, shifting the case to passive monitoring status until new information emerged. Evidence, samples, and crime scene photos were packaged and stored in the evidence vault at the Calhoun County office. The case file was marked active, standby, meaning still open but with no active deployment. Benson signed the document ending the emergency phase, noting the time, January 3, 2008, 10:45 a.m. A copy was sent to Lansing, another kept at Marshall PD. He instructed the secretary to notify Martha Harlan's relatives that the search was temporarily halted due to objective conditions, but the case remained under supervision. In his internal log, he added, "Weather continues poor, snow depth, nearly 30 centimeters. Unable to conduct further searches." That afternoon, he drove alone to the foundry one last time before the temporary lockdown was lifted. The road into the industrial area was almost completely buried under thick snow, with only a few wooden stakes protruding as markers. Inside, the workshop buildings lay in silence, sealed barriers covered in white frost. He stopped the car, got out, and looked around stakes marked 4A and 4B, where burned samples had been collected. Strong winds blew, swirling blinding snow gusts that buried all old tire tracks. In that moment, Marshall Foundry looked like an untouched ice block, with no traces left suggesting it had once been considered the center of the disappearance. Benson crouched down to jot a few brief lines in his log. No new traces, scene intact, weather obstructing all activity. He stood still, gazing at the glistening white ground, realizing that 2 weeks of effort had circled back to the starting point. Upon returning to the station, he submitted the final daily report, numbered 10 in the Harlan Missing File series. Under the bolded case status line, he handwrote, "No progress. Investigation to continue when conditions allow." Finally, he set down his pen, closed the nearly 300-page file, and labeled it temporarily, "No results." Outside, snow continued falling steadily, so thick it obscured the station's front sign. Pale yellow lights cast a foggy glow on the snow layer. In the empty office, only the steady hum of the heater remained, mingled with the sound of pen scratching paper, as Benson wrote the final line in the duty log. 10 days, no results. Search suspended. File archived for passive monitoring. No clear criminal indicators. In February 2008, as the snow began to gradually melt on the streets around Marshall, the disappearance of the Harlan family still showed no progress. The expanded search efforts proposed by the state police were not approved due to lack of grounds and excessive costs. Benson, in his report to the county office, confirmed no new evidence, no additional witnesses, or physical evidence discovered. Since then, file hash M074,821 was officially moved to the long-term follow-up category. The search cards, maps, photographs, and remaining samples were carefully organized, sealed in 4 large boxes, labeled Harlan Family. Missing persons, pending. Benson personally signed the labels, added storage barcodes, before transferring the entire set to the basement storage of the Marshall Police Department. He kept the original file, including interrogation transcripts, duty logs, and appraisal results from Lansing, in his personal filing cabinet. There was no directive to close the case outright, but classifying it as a cold case meant it was no longer a priority. Throughout the spring, things returned to the town's normal rhythm. Schools reopened. St. Mary's Church continued holding services, but the story of the Harlan family was still whispered about in local coffee shops and supermarkets. The most discussed topic among residents was Ethan Granger, the last neighbor to speak with the victims. Although the police did not charge or prosecute him, silent suspicion clung to him. Some people avoided greeting him, and a few customers stopped bringing their cars to the garage where he worked. Ethan still went to work regularly, but his face always carried a weary expression. He once went to the station to ask Benson if there was any way to be cleared from the file. But Benson could only reply that the matter was not concluded, the file was still open, and he remained on the witness list. There was no reason to charge him, but also no grounds to completely rule him out. The town gradually stopped talking about the case. Only occasionally, when the first snow of the season fell, someone would mention the small house of the Harlan family, where the lights had once been on all night. Inside the police station, the Harlan missing file lay dormant on a metal shelf, alongside dozens of others, each box just a number and a brief note. Benson still checked them at the end of each month, an old habit from his days on dispatch duty. Once, he opened a box to recheck the documents, the smell of damp paper and rusty metal rising in the air. He smoothed out the old transcripts, noticing that his handwriting had blurred in a few places due to moisture. But everything was still legible. He folded the file back up, locked the cabinet, and walked out into the quiet hallway. Years on the force had taught him that some cases have no answers, and Marshall Foundry seemed to be one of them. On the office wall, the area map still hung in place, with red markers now faded. In the duty logbook, Benson added a brief note, March 2008, no new developments. Harlan file transferred to cold case, stored, original kept in office. As he closed the book, late winter light streamed through the window, reflecting off the brass badge on the desk, briefly illuminating the room before it sank back into silence. In the years that followed, time quietly passed over the town of Marshall, as if the disappearance had never happened. After the Harlan missing file was moved to the cold case category, no one mentioned it much, except for a few local reporters who wrote anniversary articles and then dropped it due to lack of new information. In 2009, Marshall Foundry began deteriorating rapidly. Old tin roofs collapsed after winter windstorms, steel frames rusted, windows shattered, and vines grew over the main gate. The abandoned industrial site became a hangout for teenagers in the evenings, then was completely fenced off by new property owners to prevent trespassing. In urban security reports, the foundry area was classified as a hazardous structure, no longer usable. The Marshall Police Department also changed gradually. Half the old force retired or transferred, archived files were digitized, and only unsolved or very old cases remained in the basement storage. Benson continued working for another 6 years, until he retired in the summer of 2014. A small farewell ceremony took place in the department's assembly hall, simple and quiet, just like his style. Afterward, he left Marshall to live with his son in Lansing. Among the boxes of documents he left at the office was a thin, string-tied file with an old label still reading Harlan, Missing Persons, 2007. He instructed the young clerk that if there was ever a review, to keep the original in storage and not digitize it, because some old papers only make sense when seen with the naked eye. In 2012, Robert Carr, the primary witness, died in a workplace accident in Battle Creek. The news was briefly noted in the local paper, and no one connected it to the long-dormant case. Ethan Granger still lived in Marshall, continuing to work at the small garage, more withdrawn than before, living quietly but never leaving the town. The Harlan family home was foreclosed and sold by the bank in 2010. The new owner renovated it completely, repainted it a different color, leaving almost no trace of those who once lived there. Meanwhile, the police department's basement storage filled up with unresolved cases. Old file boxes were arranged by year, labels fading, dust covering everything. On the third shelf, in the range 07-4800 to 07-4900, among boxes containing unsolved thefts and accidents, the Harlan family box lay untouched, its barcode yellowed. No one had opened it in over a decade. The Calhoun County digital archive system was updated annually, but the Harlan disappearance was never entered due to lack of original digitized data. Their names gradually disappeared from public records, existing only in Benson's old handwritten notes. In 2016, news of Benson's death was announced internally at the department. A few old colleagues attended the memorial, talking about cases he had investigated, but no one mentioned Marshall Foundry. That same year, a major winter storm completely collapsed the roof of Workshop 4, burying the remaining sealed concrete foundation. City police added more barbed wire fencing and posted new warning signs. From then on, the foundry was officially abandoned. Near the end of 2019, as the Marshall Police Department began converting storage to digital, young staff were assigned to review old file boxes in the basement. In the damp, dusty air of the paper-filled room, one of the oldest boxes still bore Benson's handwriting, its seal intact, the ink faded almost to nothing. None of them knew that after 12 years, this was the first time the file had been touched since it was removed from the metal shelf in the winter of 2008, a forgotten collection of documents among hundreds of cases that had slumbered with time. In November 2019, the Cold Case File Digitization Program was rolled out across the state of Michigan, with Marshall being one of the first departments to pilot it. In the old basement, where metal shelves were crammed with dusty document boxes, a team of technicians began inventorying each file, attaching QR codes, and transferring everything to Calhoun County's electronic storage system. Lena Morris, a young technician recently transferred from Lansing, was assigned to oversee the last section of 2007 files, the least touched area since most had lost investigative value. She moved slowly between the shelves, the headlamp on her helmet casting a dim glow in the damp air. Many paper boxes had disintegrated, labels faded, and some codes were unreadable. When she reached the third shelf, she noticed a box without a code, only a white paper label handwritten with foundry evidence. The ink had faded to a brownish gray, the writing scrawled as if done in haste. Per protocol, all uncoded boxes had to be inspected and re-entered, so she pulled it from the shelf. Dust clouded the air, and the smell of old paper and rust wafted strongly. The box was heavier than the others, its lid sealed with old tape but intact. Lena placed it on the table, cut the tape and slowly opened it. Inside were nylon document bags, each hand-numbered with blue ink. On top was a crumpled envelope labeled Marshall Foundry, 2007, containing 7 old printed photos with yellowed edges. She carefully laid them out on the table, wiping off thin dust with rubber gloves. The photos were all of the Workshop 4 crime scene, scorched cement floor, smoke stains on the walls, and a few wide-angle shots of the snow-covered industrial area. Another showed a gray truck parked near the fence, the license plate blurry, but with the first characters still readable. Lena lingered longer on this photo, noting the sequence number on the label before continuing with the rest. Beneath the documents, she found a small black USB drive, labeled Benson Foundry _21 deck. It was an old generation USB port, the plastic scratched, apparently used years ago. There was also a thin notebook with a brown leather cover, bound with a stretched rubber band. When opened, the first pages were filled with dense handwriting, signed H. Benson. The beginning listed samples collected at the foundry, the middle contained scattered notes, including "Care knows something, needs verification." Lena paused to read carefully, her breath visible in the cold air. She immediately photographed the entire contents, saved them to her tablet, and carefully returned the items to the box in order. Per procedure, she had to report to the inventory team lead before opening any uncoded evidence. When the team lead, Lieutenant Derek Walsh, arrived, she presented the discovery. He rechecked the box, confirming it was not in the digitization catalog, nor in the county's physical evidence storage system. They agreed to log it as a special discovery. Derek skimmed Benson's notebook, recognizing his authentic signature at the end of the last page. This meant it was an original file, never formally submitted to state archives. He instructed Lena to reseal the entire box, label it Marshall Foundry, Evidence Box 07A, unregistered, sign off, and transfer it to the sheriff's office for cross-reference. As Lena attached the new barcode, she felt her hands tremble slightly. A mix of excitement and curiosity crept into her mind. In the system classification list, she entered a brief description, uncoded box containing documents related to 2007 Foundry case, including evidence and Benson data. She didn't know that those old photos in the USB drive would be the starting point for a deeper review spanning months afterward, sparked by a small discovery in the damp basement of an aging police department. When the day's work ended, Lena lingered longer in front of the now empty shelf where the box had been, feeling as if she had touched something that should not have been forgotten for so long. The next morning, the Foundry evidence box was transferred to the sheriff's office for review. Due to its connection to an unsolved case, the entire contents were handed over to Calhoun County's special review team, responsible for evaluating cold case files before digitization. Lena Morris was required to be present to describe the discovery process and provide all initial photos. In a small meeting room, the box was reopened in the presence of 2 investigating officers and a prosecutor's office representative. The contents were neatly laid out on the table. 7 printed photos, the leather-bound notebook, and an old black USB drive. Lieutenant Derek Walsh, wearing gloves, lifted each photo and examined it with a handheld magnifying glass. The third photo drew the most attention. A silver-gray truck parked close to the north fence of Workshop 4. The snow undisturbed, the exhaust pipe covered in black soot. The license plate was blurry, but the first characters, 4CX, were recognizable, matching the sequence in Robert Carr's vehicle registration file that Benson had compiled over 10 years earlier. Near the edge of the photo, faint blue ink noted December 21, 07, 1940, north wall corner. Under the meeting room lights, the ink was so faint it nearly blended into the paper, but still readable. Walsh paused, tapping his fingers on the table's edge, then moved to the notebook. The first pages contained technical notations and sample descriptions matching the official reports. But midway through, the handwriting changed, appearing hurried from field work. Care knows something. Talked about generator, doesn't match. Right hand burn, strong fuel smell. Below another line, truck photo temp saved. Check tire tracks. The notes stopped abruptly mid-page, unsigned. Walsh glanced at the prosecutor's representative and turned to the end of the notebook, where only a few lines with dates and the code, E4703, not cleared, remained. He moved to the USB, plugging it into an air-gapped computer. The screen showed a single folder named Foundry_21 Deck. Inside were 6 files, 4 DTF images, and 2 short videos recorded with an old service camera, timestamps matching the night of December 21, 2007. The footage was grainy and shaky, a flashlight beam sweeping over the snowy ground, clearly revealing smoke stains and the scorched area mentioned in the original report. In the final frame, the lens panned across the iron gate, the light reflecting off a metallic object resembling a truck exhaust pipe. Benson's low, clipped voice sounded, "Record the license plate, might be relevant." Then the video ended. Walsh rewound that segment twice, cross-referencing it with the printed photo in the envelope. Everything matched in angle and position. He exhaled softly, noting, "Gray truck, highly likely Carr's vehicle on night of 12/21." When rereading Benson's notebook notes, he spotted a small line in the left margin, "Not reported. Verify before sending to Lansing." This detail silenced the group for a few seconds. It suggested the photos and video on the USB may never have been formally submitted in the original report. Lena stood nearby, hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the screen. She recalled opening the box. All items were carefully packed, undamaged, meaning someone had intentionally preserved their original state. When Walsh turned to the final page of the notebook, he noticed a small folded corner with a single line inside, "If rechecking. Look at north wall under burn mark." He underlined it with a pen, closed the book, and ordered the entire contents photographed and the USB data backed up to a secure drive. The immediate log stated, "Discovery of unregistered documents directly related to witness Robert Carr, including truck photos and Benson's notes." Cross-reference with official file required to determine match level. When the meeting ended, Walsh sat alone, flipping through the truck photo once more. The snow reflected dim light. The truck standing still against the dark workshop wall, the low-angle shot, giving the scene an eerie, cold atmosphere. He set the photo down, looked at the scrawled, "Care knows something" in the notebook, and realized that Benson, at the time, may have suspected far more than what he wrote in the official report. That same afternoon, an urgent evaluation log was created, and all newly discovered evidence was transferred to the Calhoun County Prosecutor's Office for assessment. The receiving officer was ADA Kelly Seidler, deputy prosecutor in charge of cold case reviews, who had handled many reinvestigations of old files in the state. Upon receiving the Foundry evidence box, she ordered it resealed and personally opened and inspected each item in the presence of a legal assistant and a records officer. The crime scene photos were laid out on the table in chronological order per notes. The video was extracted from the USB and played on a screen, and Benson's notebook was read page by page for cross-reference. Seidler meticulously noted and underlined key details. Truck photo matches car vehicle description. Benson note, "Car knows something," not reported to Lansing. After reviewing everything, she requested the office immediately retrieve the 2008 Lansing submission file for comparison. A copy arrived that day, in a green binder stamped Cold Case Archive. Upon comparison, Seidler discovered clear discrepancies. The official report made no mention of the truck photo, no reference to Benson suspecting witness car, and the workshop 4 scene description only stated minor burn marks, no signs of crime. However, in Benson's notebook, the note "Car knows something" was written right after December 22nd, meaning he discovered this detail just one day after opening the file. She reviewed the end of the notebook, where "not reported" needs verification was handwritten, then looked up and asked the clerk to scan and back up all new documents digitally and prepare a comparison report. The internal summary clearly stated discrepancy between original file and Lansing submission. Possible existence of undisclosed evidence or information. Seidler reread Benson's appendix, the hurried handwriting, and paused at E4703, not cleared. She requested the records department check all evidence codes in storage, but E4703 did not exist in the Lansing catalog, indicating the evidence was either lost or never sent. She stared thoughtfully at the old document box, then turned to Derek Walsh, standing at the door, and asked, "Are you sure this is something Benson kept himself?" He nodded, confirming the signature on the last page matched personnel records exactly. Seidler sat still for a moment, fingers tapping lightly on the table's edge, then said quietly, "If so, what's in here could change the entire evaluation of the case." She had the evidence repackaged, sealed with new tape, and noted in the transfer log that file shows inconsistencies between original and Lansing archive. Re-evaluation required. She then drafted a memo to the Michigan State Police, requesting a review of the 2007 Foundry file storage process, particularly evidence transfer procedures. In the memo, she wrote, "Based on recovered documents, there are indications that some initial information was not fully reflected in the official file. Recommend forming a re-investigation team." At the end of the day, after the document was sent, she sat reviewing each photo again. Snow-covered scenes, desolate steel frames, faint burn marks, stretching like open wounds. In the truck photo, she saw the blurry but sufficient license plate, triggering her memory of details in the 2007 witness statement, where Robert Carr claimed he parked near Workshop 4 to check the generator. When placing the two documents side by side, she realized the timelines matched perfectly, except the original report never mentioned Benson identifying the vehicle at the scene. That meant either he intentionally omitted it in his submission, or someone edited it afterward. Seidler closed the notebook, placed it in a sealed bag, and added a final line to the internal report. Benson's file never disclosed. Information regarding Carr requires full re-verification. She signed it, time-stamped 1748, and stared at the file box for a long moment. In the dim office light, the handwritten Foundry evidence from 12 years ago stood out like an old reminder that the disappearance, thought to be closed, may never have been fully investigated. 2 weeks after Kelly Seidler sent the official writ, the order to resurvey the Marshall Foundry site was approved. On the morning of December 14, 2019, the Michigan State Police Special Technical Team, in coordination with the Marshall Police Department, arrived at the scene. The old factory site was then in the demolition phase to make way for an industrial redevelopment project. The steel frames had been removed, the workshop walls were cracked and crumbling, and the concrete foundation was covered in cement dust. Under the overcast sky, a thin mist drifted over the wasteland, and the wind whistled through the gaps, causing the entire area to emit a low rumble like the breathing of a dying giant. Kelly was present in person, overseeing the survey process in her role as legal supervisor. Workshop number 4, which 12 years earlier had been marked as a point of suspicion, now consisted only of a cracked and broken foundation and one collapsed corner wall. The on-site team leader, Lieutenant Richard Hanley, divided the area into 6 search grids, marked with red paint on the concrete, each grid 2 meters square. As the team began scanning, a technician detected an unusual subsidence in the foundation at the north corner. The cement surface there sounded hollow when tapped, and the crack edges extended deeper than at other locations. Hanley ordered the excavator to stop temporarily and had tarps erected around the area to prevent dust from spreading. They used a ground-penetrating radar GPR scanner to check the density of material below, and the results displayed on the screen showed a localized void area of approximately 1.2 square meters, about half a meter deep, completely different from the remaining concrete structure. As they pried up the thin cement slabs above, a thick layer of gray dust billowed up. Under the portable floodlights, Hanley saw a layer of shiny black material mixed with soil and ash fragments. He knelt down and used a small trowel to scrape away thin layers. Just a few minutes later, a piece of partially burned gray-brown fabric emerged, followed by small metal fragments that could be buttons or zipper pulls. The entire area was immediately cordoned off, and Kelly was called to confirm. She approached, put on gloves, looked through the layer of ash and soil, and requested that a discovery report be filed for suspected biological origin objects. The excavation continued by hand, slowly and carefully. At a depth of about 40 centimeters, a technician found a small ivory-colored object the size of a coin, with a porous bone-like structure. Hanley immediately halted all mechanical operations and switched to forensic excavation protocol. Small objects were removed one by one, placed in specialized plastic bags, and labeled in order of discovery. Over the next 3 hours, they collected a total of more than 20 small items, a piece of fabric, several ash fragments containing synthetic fibers, and 8 small bone fragments of varying sizes. One of them clearly resembled a finger phalange bone, with black burn marks on the cut surface. Kelly observed silently, gesturing for the forensics team to continue scanning the surrounding area. The GPR revealed 2 additional smaller voids to the west, but due to ground subsidence, only one was accessible. At the second location, they found a few bent metal fragments and a thick piece of broken glass, possibly from a lamp tube or container. Everything was videotaped, photographed with GPS coordinates, and sealed. Hanley's preliminary report stated the subsided area likely had been patched with inconsistent concrete, and beneath it were combustible materials, including bone and synthetic fabric. Kelly signed the report and ordered a halt to all demolition work in the area, handing the site over to the State Forensics Agency. By late afternoon, light snow flurried down, and the wind shifted, blowing dust and smoke back over the area, shrouding it in a hazy fog. The last workers packed up their equipment, set up temporary barricades with tarps and wooden stakes around the subsidence, and hung signs reading "Restricted Area" under forensic control. All samples collected that day were sealed in 3 crates and transported by specialized vehicle to Lansing that same night. Before leaving, Kelly walked a lap around the edge of the workshop area, her eyes lingering on the rubble wall that 12 years earlier Benson had marked as burn marks. Amid the empty foundation, the blackened concrete streaks were still visible, despite time having erased most of them. She quietly jotted a few lines in her notebook. North Subsidence Foundation, ash, fabric, small bones discovered. Matches Benson's notes location. As the convoy left the foundry, the flashing red lights reflected off the damp, mossy brick walls, casting their elongated shadows on the snow-covered ground. In the distance, the wind howled through the exposed steel frames, creating a low moan that blended with the fading sound of engines, leaving the abandoned factory plunged into absolute silence, marked only by footprints and sealed barricades where that silence had just been broken. The samples collected from the concrete subsidence in Workshop Number 4 were transported to the Michigan State Forensics Laboratory in Lansing in the early hours of the following morning. The intake process was logged at 2:17 a.m. under the supervision of the head of forensic technology, Dr. Michael Hartley. He ordered the seals opened immediately and conducted a preliminary inspection of each sample to ensure no cross-contamination had occurred during transport. The bone fragments were categorized by size and degree of charring. The fabric and ash were separated into sterile trays, and the remaining items were small metal fragments and glass shards. That same morning, the forensics team began DNA extraction using spongy bone sample scanning techniques. Each fragment was numbered by discovery location, a 1 to a 8. Within 36 hours, initial analysis results showed that 4 of the 8 samples had clear duplicated gene sequences suitable for comparison. Michigan's identity database retained a DNA sample from a Harlan family member provided during the 2008 search phase, allowing for rapid matching. At noon on December 17, 2019, Dr. Hartley signed the confirmation DNA samples, a 3, a 4, a 6, a 7, matched the Harlan profile gene sequence, biological identity probability, 99.8%. This report was sent directly to ADA Kelly Seidler. Upon reading the results, she was silent for a few seconds, then requested further testing on the ash samples to determine the cause of the fire. At the same time, the evidence analysis team, examining the metal fragments found in the ash, identified a small cylindrical object engraved with Zippo. The exterior was smoke-stained, but after cleaning, the steel casing revealed the classic flame design and an embossed RC marking. The technicians scanned the surface and extracted a partial but identifiable fingerprint with enough characteristic points for comparison. The state criminal database held Robert Carr's records from a 1998 traffic violation that included stored fingerprints. Upon matching, the results showed 5 exact matches and 3 relative similarities, with an error probability of less than 1/100,000th. The report concluded, fingerprint matches Robert Carr data. Kelly read to this point, nodded slowly, and added a marginal note, confirms Carr's presence at the workshop. But what drew her attention most was the chemical analysis of the ash samples. Carbon monoxide residue and soot particles in the bones indicated the victim had inhaled CO gas before death, meaning the death did not occur instantly, but in an environment with fuel combustion. Dr. Hartley explained, during a direct call, that the CO ratio in the bone samples indicates asphyxiation as the primary cause, with no evidence of mechanical violence. The preliminary report clearly stated cause of death: CO gas asphyxiation in an enclosed environment, likely from a generator. The body was subsequently concealed with ash and concrete. In the appendix, the experts listed traces of partially burned synthetic fabric fibers matching the material of a 2007 winter jacket, a common brand sold in Midwest supermarkets. The thick glass fragment was identified as industrial lighting glass, compatible with workshop fixtures. All this data pointed to one conclusion: the area where the bones and ash were found had experienced a small low-heat fire, not an explosion or large burning. As Kelly reviewed the entire report, she realized the forensic results had closed the logical chain that the old files had only hinted at. The Harlan family died of asphyxiation in the Foundry area, not vanishing without cause. But notably, Carr's fingerprint on the Zippo lighter, an item never recorded in the old files, indicated his presence at the scene immediately after the incident. The preliminary conclusion in the typed report was carefully formatted in bold. Biological samples match Harlan relative. Carr fingerprint on object, fire and ash evidence suggests body concealment. Kelly signed the confirmation, sent copies to Lansing and Marshall PD, and requested the technical lab preserve all samples at standard temperature for potential further analysis. That afternoon, the report was filed in the system with the new code, Foundry Forensic 2019-12. In her office, light from the window streamed through frosted glass onto the thick stack of documents. Kelly closed the file, her hand lingering on Dr. Hartley's final line. Preliminary results: no violent behavior, death by CO asphyxiation, physical evidence indicates concealment effort. The air in the room felt heavy, filled only with the steady hum of the printer and the scent of fresh ink mingling with the early winter chill of Lansing. Immediately after receiving the forensic results, Kelly Seidler directed an expansion of telecommunications data analysis to verify the presence of Robert Carr and related individuals during the time of the incident. The Lansing technical team, in coordination with the Michigan State Telecommunications Bureau, retrieved archived records from the BTS tower system in the Marshall area for the night of December 21, 2007. The original data had been backed up on the carrier's backup servers, retained for 10 years as required, and some was recovered from old tapes. It took the specialists 3 days to extract signals from all mobile devices registered within a 10-mile radius of Marshall Foundry between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. The results showed that at 6:47 p.m., a device registered to Robert Carr began emitting signals from Tower 12, with coordinates exactly matching the Foundry industrial area. From 7:15 p.m. to 8:05 p.m., the signal remained stationary at the same location, then quickly shifted to Tower 14 south of town, on the route back to Carr's home. This time frame precisely matched Carr's 2007 statement, claiming he was at the workshop for about an hour. However, what stood out was that Carr's network signal had two brief disconnections of about 3 minutes each, at 7:32 p.m. and 7:51 p.m., likely due to him entering an enclosed area where the signal was obstructed. The technical report assessed low margin of error, with reliability over 95%. At the same time, Kelly requested a cross-check of Ethan Granger's phone data to verify the alibi he provided in the original file. The carrier confirmed Ethan's device maintained continuous connection to the BTS tower near his Southside residential area from 5:30 p.m. to 11:45 p.m., with no tower switches, indicating he left the area. The vehicle GPS tracking app also recorded his car parked at home, with no movement that night. The report was sent back to Kelly with a clear conclusion: no evidence that Ethan Granger's device left the residential area during the 6 p.m.-10 p.m. window. She read the two datasets side by side, then marked in red pen the points aligning with physical evidence: Carr's time at Foundry, the confirmed time of victim death by CO asphyxiation, and mobile phone signal location matching workshop, NOMA. 4's coverage. When pieced together, the entire sequence formed a seamless timeline. 6:45 p.m. Carr arrives at the workshop, 7 o'clock, 8 p.m. signal interruptions occur. 8:05 p.m. signal leaves the area, heading south. In the internal report, Kelly wrote, telecom data confirms Carr's presence at the scene on the night of December 21, 2007. Ethan Granger, verified as not leaving home during the same period. Preliminary conclusion: Ethan eliminated as suspect. She had the signal maps, network strength charts archived, and requested the technical team create a visual reconstruction of Carr's route. 3 days later, the simulation was complete. A glowing dot moving from Carr's home on Marshall's south edge to the Foundry, pausing there for 78 minutes, then returning via the main road. As Kelly watched the simulation, the light moved slowly, then stopped at the corner marked Workshop Gnome. 4. Coinciding with environmental data showing unusual heat, consistent with the fuel combustion hypothesis from a generator. She stared at the screen for a long time, then wrote in the comprehensive report, "Digital evidence confirms car's actions and location perfectly match the scene. No other devices detected in the area at the time, ruling out a second person." In the report submitted to the county prosecutor, she emphasized, "The alignment between BTS data and forensic results provides solid grounds to establish car's presence and activity in the foundry on the night of the incident. This is independent evidence unaffected by delayed acquisition." When closing the file, Kelly underlined car's name and wrote beside it, "Present at the scene directly involved." Outside, winter wind blew fiercely, the curtains swaying rhythmically, afternoon light streaming through the window, reflecting off maps covered in dense markings. In the quiet room, only the hum of the computer displayed the final coordinate sequence, Foundry BTS 1947, active connection. User R car. After the telecom data was confirmed, Kelly Seidler directed the on-scene investigation team to expand collection of supplemental statements to solidify Robert Carr's timeline of activity on the night of December 21, 2007. The first target was the only gas station on the route from his home to the Foundry industrial area, Midway Fuel Stop on Industrial Drive, about 2 miles from the factory gate. The station's old accounting records were stored in the business database, with digital copies retained by the new owner. The investigation team located the former owner, Dennis Clark, now retired and living in Battle Creek. During the interview, he recalled a matching detail. "I was on duty that night, around 7 o'clock, when a middle-aged man in a gray pickup stopped to refuel. I remember because it was snowing hard, yet he bought 2 full gas cans." When shown a photo of Robert Carr, he nodded without hesitation. "That's him. I even asked why he was out so late, and he just said he needed to run a generator in the warehouse." This statement was recorded, accompanied by a signed confirmation. The accounting records from that time also logged a cash transaction for 2 industrial gas cans, with the receipt timestamp at 7:08 p.m. This matched perfectly with the BTS data retrieved by the telecom team, when Carr's phone began signaling from Tower 12 near Foundry around 6:47 p.m. and moved away from the gas station shortly after. Kelly added Clark's statement to the investigation report, marking the line confirmed fuel purchase, timing prior to Foundry entry. She then requested the technical team verify the identity of the 2007 factory security guard listed in the old files as Thomas Avery, a contract employee of Steelwatch Security Company. Avery, now over 60, lived in Grand Rapids and was invited for a formal interview. In the statement protocol, he confirmed he had worked the evening shift at Foundry on December 21, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. "I remember clearly because it was the first big snowfall of the year. Around 8 o'clock, I saw headlights shining through the fence at Workshop Numar 4, then heard an engine running for a few minutes, probably a generator." Avery said he assumed it was maintenance staff on routine checks and didn't intervene. However, nearing 9 o'clock, he saw a gray pickup leaving the workshop area, driving slowly through the north gate. He remembered clearly because one taillight was out, and the exhaust smoke was very black. When Kelly showed him a photo of the truck from Benson's old images, Avery confirmed immediately. "That's the type, I can't be mistaken, short bed pickup, plate starting with C." He also added that the driver was stocky, wearing a dark coat and gloves, but his face wasn't clear due to dim lighting. Avery's statement was recorded and cross-checked against the 2007 guard log submitted by Steelwatch to Marshall PD. In the old log, the notes section briefly stated, "Truck observed at workshop, no incident." Kelly noted this matched Avery's described timing, though none were signed, likely because internal records weren't finalized at the time. She requested the legal department verify Avery's signature on his guard contract to ensure the new statement's legal validity. Meanwhile, the data analysis team cross-referenced the timeline. 7:08 p.m., Carr buys fuel, 7:47 p.m. phone signal appears at Foundry, 8:05 p.m. still in the area, 8:55 p.m. vehicle seen leaving Northgate, a closed timeline. In the comprehensive report, Kelly wrote, "New statements confirm Robert Carr's presence at Foundry during the incident window. Physical evidence and telecom data align with witness testimony. Ethan Granger confirmed absent from the area. Reviewing all documents, she paused at the detail. One taillight out. Comparing it to photos of the truck in Benson's old set, it matched perfectly, left taillight on, right one dim and nearly out." She underlined this note in the protocol, considering it the strongest corroborating point. That afternoon, Kelly and the investigation team returned to the scene to reconstruct Avery's described path. Snow covered the ground thickly, but the old road traces remained clear on historical maps, connecting from the north gate to the highway. Standing in the open lot looking toward the collapsed workshop wall, she felt the heavy silence of what was once thought to be the last point of the disappearance. Scattered facts from the past 12 years now aligned into a straight line, from the gas station to the workshop, then leaving into the snowy night, leaving ash and bones buried in the foundation. She stood still, cold wind blowing through the chain-link fence, the hem of her coat flapping. In her notebook, she wrote the final line for that day, supplemental statements complete. Carr confirmed present at Foundry on disappearance night. Second witness confirms vehicle departure timing. Data closes the factual timeline. When all the new statements and telecommunications data were merged, Kelly Sadler instructed the legal records team to conduct a detailed comparison between the original report drafted by Benson in 2007 and the official archived version in Lansing to determine the reason why many critical facts had disappeared. She and two assistants went directly to the Marshall PD archives, where Benson had once kept the paper copies of the cold cases. In an old iron cabinet, they found a thin file folder with a beige cover, labeled Foundry, December 2007, original copy. Beneath a thick layer of dust, the signature, H. Benson, was still clearly visible in the bottom right corner of each page. When she opened to the end of the report, Kelly noticed a handwritten note inserted between two typed lines, Carr admitted fault. Claimed malfunction at generator, caused accident. This line was crossed out with a single red ink stroke, with a small RAR mark above it. She circled that detail and requested it be photographed with a high-resolution camera. Immediately after, the legal specialists opened the copy submitted to Lansing for comparison. In the electronically archived version, the phrase "Carr admitted fault" was completely gone, with the adjacent sentences seamlessly joined, as if there had never been any editing. The page count matched, but the table of contents was shifted by one line. The edit timestamp in the file's metadata read, January 25, 2008, user MSP-admin03. This user belonged to the State Police storage system, not Marshall PD. Kelly asked the technical specialist to recover the previous version of the file using data recovery software. Upon restoration, the line "Carr admitted fault" reappeared along with an automatic deletion note, delete note for read action. This meant someone had deliberately removed that detail before the file was transferred to the official archive. The Lansing report confirmed this was not a technical error, but a manual operation performed by someone with administrative access privileges. Kelly sat silently in front of the screen for a long time, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the desk, then said slowly, "So Carr's admission of fault was once recorded in the file, but it was deleted." She had a separate record created for this discovery, including photos of the original page and the restored electronic file. In the internal memo, she wrote, "Discrepancy identified between Benson's original file and the Lansing version. The line "Carr admitted fault" was manually deleted, confirmed post-submission alteration." From there, the records audit team expanded the comparison to 7 additional pages, discovering 2 other sections with similar deletion traces, including the description "larger than expected burn marks" and "metal object near the subsidence area." Both were removed from the archived version. Kelly determined that the entire editing operation was intended to downplay the severity of the scene and eliminate any elements that might suggest human error. In the internal investigation log, she clearly noted, "High likelihood that the edits were made to protect witness Carr from prosecution." She reread every page of Benson's report, his hurried but firm handwriting interspersed among the typed lines, indicating he had suspected Carr in the generator incident. At the bottom corner of the document was the certification signature H. Benson, filed December 24, 2007, just 3 days after the disappearance. The copy sent to Lansing was stamped, dated the 26th, meaning there was at least a 2-day gap between the writing and submission. That was the window during which the editing could have occurred. Kelly called the Lansing Data Administration Office to trace the identity of the user, MSP Admin 03. After a few hours, the response came back. The account belonged to a retired official from 2016, named Thomas Rayner, who had been responsible for proofreading documents before archiving. When questioned, he stated that per instructions at the time, all unverified information had to be removed. However, he did not recall who gave the instructions. Kelly noted the explanation, but the access logs showed the changes were made consecutively over 20 minutes, with no approval documentation. The official audit report stated, "Confirmed out-of-process editing, direct evidence shows the document was altered." Kelly backed up all the data onto a secure hard drive, sealed it, and created a supplementary file coded Foundry Audit 2019-02. When rereading the line "Carr admitted fault" on the old paper page, she paused for a long time, imagining Benson 12 years earlier, hunched over writing that line hurriedly in the night shift room during winter. He likely knew that sentence alone was enough to change the direction of the investigation, but for some reason, it never appeared in the official report. Kelly placed the paper back into the envelope, closed the box, and signed the confirmation. On the final summary line of the log, she wrote, "Evidence shows the original report was deliberately edited to remove unfavorable information regarding Robert Carr. Conclusion: confirmed file tampering." After confirming the file had been edited and recovering all the data, Kelly Seidler and the forensic technical team began reconstructing the incident's timeline based on the available evidence. Every detail, from telecommunications data, forensic results, witness statements, to Benson's original report, was pieced together into a logically consistent sequence. According to the synthesis, on the evening of December 21, 2007, Robert Carr left his home on the south edge of Marshall around 6:30 p.m., carrying 2 gas cans purchased at Midway Fuel Stop at 7:08 p.m. He drove his gray pickup truck to the Marshall Foundry area, stopping at Workshop 4, where he still had keys to check the backup generator. At that time, heavy snow was falling, with strong winds and temperatures below -10 degrees. Carr started the generator, but due to rust in the system and a completely clogged ventilation grid, carbon monoxide gas began accumulating rapidly inside the workshop. Around 7:30 p.m., the Harlan family, driving home from St. Mary's Church, passed by the industrial area. According to prior neighbor statements, Martha Harlan had mentioned she would stop by the foundry to drop something off for an acquaintance, likely for Carr, whom she knew from her time working at the plant. When the minivan stopped near the factory, snow blanketed the road, visibility was limited, and Carr may have signaled them to park in the northern area where he was testing the machine. While he continued starting the engine, Colorado gas from the generator began seeping out through door cracks, mixing with the cold fog surrounding the area. The Harlan family sat in the car waiting, with doors tightly closed to keep out the cold, and the car engine running for heat. In the unventilated environment, within just a few dozen minutes, the CO concentration was sufficient to cause gradual suffocation. Forensic analysis showed carbon monoxide traces in their bone samples, corresponding to exposure of about 30 to 40 minutes. When Carr turned off the generator and approached, he likely discovered the car was completely still. In a panic, he opened the car door and realized all 6 people were unconscious. Instead of calling for help, he was overwhelmed by panic. As someone with a history of violations and prior internal investigations, Carr feared being held responsible for a serious accident in a restricted area. According to Benson's notebook note, he admitted fault due to generator malfunction, which matched the line "car admitted fault" in the original report. From there, the reconstruction team concluded that Carr attempted to handle the scene. He may have used the truck to move the bodies and the minivan deeper into the workshop area to an empty concrete foundation. There, he used excess fuel from the gas cans to set a fire to destroy evidence, but due to low temperatures and limited fuel, the fire wasn't strong enough for complete incineration. As a result, some ash, fabric, and bone fragments remained, exactly what was found 12 years later. When the fire died out, Carr used a shovel to scoop up the ash and poured concrete rubble over it to cover it, creating the uneven foundation layer discovered by the 2019 survey team. This explained the fuel smell and smoke stains noted by Benson in 2007, but with no blood or DNA traces, the fire had smoldered briefly, and the ash mixed with cement and industrial dust. After covering it, Carr left the workshop around 8:55 p.m., exactly when security guard Avery saw the gray truck leaving the north gate. Back at home, he bandaged his hand burns from contact with the hot exhaust pipe himself, then attended the victim's family funeral the next morning without revealing the truth. Behavioral analysis suggests he may have intended to return to clean up more thoroughly, but worsening weather and heavy snow quickly buried all traces. In the months that followed, as Benson grew suspicious, Carr may have given a private statement, and Benson recorded admitted fault, but there wasn't enough criminal evidence to charge him. The later file editing was likely done by management or administrative staff to close the case as an undetermined accident to avoid impacting the agency. In the final reconstruction report, the investigation team used 3D simulation software to recreate the workshop space and calculate CO emissions from the 1980S model generator. The results showed that operating in a sealed 20-minute space was enough to reach lethal concentrations. When presenting the comprehensive report, Kelly noted the conclusion, most likely sequence, Robert Carr inadvertently caused CO leak in Workshop 4. Harlan family present nearby, suffocated in vehicle. Carr panicked, burned, and concealed scene with ash and concrete. The timeline map, BTS data, and forensics all formed a closed chain. Kelly underlined the final line in the printed report and added in red pen, reconstruction complete. Direct cause, CO leak from generator. Post-incident actions, concealment of bodies and evidence. In the meeting room, as the projector light illuminated the simulation model, the image of Carr's gray truck leaving the foundry, amid the snowy night, appeared on the screen, concluding 12 years of searching for a seemingly unsolvable disappearance. After completing the incident reconstruction, Kelly Seidler sent an official request to Lansing Lab to conduct a simulated scene test to verify the CO leak, industrial accident, body concealment hypothesis. A sealed experimental area was set up at the Lansing Technical Center, accurately replicating the size and structure of Workshop 4 based on the original Marshall Foundry blueprints, including the generator's position, wall height, concrete type, and average wind direction from December 2007 meteorological data. On February 5, 2020, the technical team began the experiment. A 1980s model generator was restored to match the exact one Carr had used, with fuel as a gasoline-oil mix equivalent to the 2 cans Carr purchased. Under initial conditions, they started the generator in a sealed 60 square meter space at -8 degrees Celsius with light wind. After 12 minutes, the CO concentration in the air reached 1,500 ppm. After 20 minutes, it rose above 3,000 ppm, sufficient to cause death within half an hour. This result perfectly matched the forensic report's estimates. Gas meters and temperature sensors were placed at positions corresponding to the Harlan family's parked vehicle in the reconstruction, and the results showed CO concentration in the vehicle's sealed cabin rising 30% faster than in the external workshop space, as the heavy gas was pushed downward by wind. At the end of the first phase, the team recorded TU levels reached dangerous threshold within 25 minutes, environmental conditions consistent with suffocation hypothesis. In the second phase, the team moved to a fire test. A small amount of fuel was spread on the cement floor, mixed with metal dust, simulating cars' attempt to burn evidence. When ignited with a match, the fire flared quickly, but didn't sustain, producing thick smoke for a few minutes before dying out. The measured heat ranged below 400 degrees Celsius, not enough for complete organic matter destruction, but sufficient to scorch clothing or fabric. The results compared to 2019 scene samples showed nearly identical burning, smoke staining, and fiber degradation levels. The simulated ash sample contained carbon content equivalent to the real ash, proving the fire occurred under similar conditions. A thermal camera recorded the burning process, and when the footage was shown on the projector, everyone saw thick black smoke rising, creating a hazy layer identical to the original photo. Benson took 12 years earlier. Dr. Michael Hartley concluded in the technical log, "Reenactment experiment confirms feasibility of CO leak and concealment by fire hypothesis. Physical and chemical phenomena fully match evidence analysis results." After the experiment, the team remeasured the concrete floor surface. When a thin layer of cement was poured over the ash, it created an uneven structure, identical to the subsidence area found at the foundry. The material analysis report confirmed similarities between the simulated and real samples in porosity, color, and burn residue ratio. Hartley concluded, the foundry subsidence formed from concrete mixed with ash and soil after the fire, not natural cracking. Kelly received the nearly 70-page report, carefully reading each section and pausing at the final conclusion line. Experimental results match all physical evidence, confirming industrial accident as cause of death, followed by manual concealment actions. She underlined manual concealment in red pen and added in the margin, "This behavior explains the 2007 file discrepancies." During the results presentation meeting in Lansing, Hartley showed a video simulation of the entire process, the generator roaring, white smoke spreading, a small fire flaring then dying out, leaving black scorch marks on the concrete floor. The meeting room fell silent as the final image appeared. The scorched floor surface with a fan-shaped stain, identical to Benson's scene photo. When the screen went dark, Hartley said slowly, "If you put all the facts side by side, we have a closed-chain generator, Colorado gas, victims and concealment actions. No third-party factor." Kelly nodded, her gaze fixed on the miniature workshop model on the table, where a red dot marked KEO source. She signed the lab's final comprehensive report, where the conclusion was printed in bold, "Reenactment experiment proves industrial accident hypothesis and subsequent concealment actions match actual scene." As she left the room, she glanced back at the small workshop model, the light illuminating its gray paint, making it look exactly like a miniature replica of the foundry, cold and silent, the place where a mechanical failure led to 6 deaths and 12 years of silence, buried under dark concrete. Immediately after the simulated scene test report was approved and confirmed the feasibility of the industrial accident, subsequent concealment hypothesis, Kelly Seidler officially signed the decision to open an internal investigation to clarify the chain of responsibility regarding the 2008 file editing, particularly the role of the late police chief Harold Benson. Although Benson had passed away in 2016, verifying his handling of the case was deemed necessary to determine whether there was intervention to distort the official record. The review was assigned to the Michigan State Integrity Investigation Office in coordination with the Lansing Criminal Records Division. Their objective was to compare all documents, logs, internal minutes, and official emails from December 2007 to February 2008. From the old server backup system, the technical team recovered over 300 archived files under the username Benson_H.mpd. Among them was an email chain between Benson and the Lansing Technical Office. An email sent on December 27, 2007, from Benson's address titled, "Pending Review, Foundry," stated briefly, "Do not submit this report to the state until I confirm again. Some information needs editing." 4 days later, the system recorded the official report submission, but the sender was no longer Benson. It was the administrative account, MSP Admin 03, the same user who performed the editing, discovered earlier by the technical team. This proved Benson did not directly perform the editing, but by requesting to delay submission, he knew changes would be made. Kelly read the entire email chain, pausing at the final email on January 3, 2008, when the case was hastily closed, where Benson wrote, "No confirmed criminal elements in the case. Keep the technical report as is, remove the line about generator failure. Insufficient grounds to charge car." The final sentence, "remove the line about generator failure," exactly matched the content deleted from the Lansing archive. The internal investigation report immediately noted this as evidence that the file editing was deliberate and executed per Benson's verbal instructions. However, his motive was not to cover up a crime, but to avoid expanding the investigation into criminal territory without verified forensic results. According to statements from two former technical team members, Benson had said, "We can't conclude he caused deaths without evidence. Keep the records, but don't make them public." Nevertheless, directing the editing of official report content without creating supplementary appendices seriously violated criminal records management procedures. The investigation lasted over 2 months, reviewing all work logs and internal meeting minutes. A handwritten note from December 28, 2007, recorded by the police secretary, still clearly preserved Benson's statement in a meeting. Carr claimed the generator malfunctioned. "I don't want that line in the report. People will misunderstand." This quote was included verbatim in the Integrity Committee's conclusion. In the final report, the investigating agency clearly stated, Police Chief Harold Benson directed the editing of the 2007 Foundry case file to remove information about generator failure and witness Robert Carr's admission. This action is confirmed as deliberate editing, not technical error. Kelly read the conclusion, her expression somber. She understood Benson wasn't necessarily a manipulator. He likely just wanted to protect the Marshall Police Department's reputation, which was under pressure from numerous cold cases at the time. But that action, whatever the intent, turned an accident into a 12-year mystery, denying the victims' families any closure. In the report meeting with Calhoun County leadership, Kelly presented concisely, Foundry file was deliberately edited per Benson's instructions. No corruption detected, but violations of archiving procedures and concealment of factual information occurred. She recommended archiving all internal investigation results as a non-deletable appendix to the official file. As she left the room, Kelly carried a printed copy of the email, the paper yellowed with age, Benson's handwritten note, still clearly legible. "Hold until we have real evidence." That line encapsulated the conflict between a cautious police officer and the cumbersome administrative system he served. In her personal notebook, Kelly wrote the final line for the review section. Internal investigation concludes deliberate editing, not technical error. Benson directed changes to avoid prosecution. Files restored to original state, preserved as evidence. Outside Lansing, the last spring snow of the year began falling lightly, covering the headquarters roof with a thin layer, just like the scene at Marshall Foundry years ago, where a single red-crossed line had sent the entire case in a different direction. In April 2020, after the internal investigation into the record tampering was completed, the Berrien County Court issued a decision to hold a special hearing to review the entire Marshall Foundry, Harlan missing 2007 case, officially bringing the matter to public discussion after 13 years in the cold case category. The hearing was held in the large courtroom on the second floor of the county courthouse, attended by representatives from the state prosecutor's office, the Lansing Forensics Department, and key witnesses involved in the case, including Ethan Granger, who for over a decade had been rumored to be the last person to see the Harlan family alive. As the session opened in the morning, the atmosphere in the room was heavy, with light streaming through the glass windows, casting onto the long table where Kelly Seidler sat preparing documents. In front of her were 3 thick file sets totaling nearly 600 pages, including forensic reports, telecommunications data, internal investigation transcripts, and Harold Benson's original statement. When Judge Robert Hainsworth declared the session open, Kelly stood up and began her presentation with a summary. Newly obtained evidence, including DNA analysis, fingerprints, phone data, and crime scene experiments, has confirmed that the true cause of the 2007 incident was not a disappearance, but an industrial accident resulting in death, followed by subsequent concealment. She displayed on the screen a 3D map simulating the entire sequence of events. Car's truck leaving the gas station, traveling to the Foundry area, the Harlan family stopping near Workshop 4, Colorado, gas leaking, and as a result, 6 people dying within 30 minutes. She then presented physical evidence, bone fragments, fabric samples, ash, and a Zippo lighter bearing Carr's fingerprints. The courtroom was silent, with only the sound of rustling papers. Kelly continued to show the Lansing lab test results. DNA from the bone samples matches Harlan family relatives with a 99.8% probability. Fingerprints on the lighter match Robert Carr's data. The accumulated CO level was sufficient to cause death. On the screen, images from the fire simulation experiment appeared: small flames, black ash, a sunken concrete surface matching the actual scene. Next, she presented the original transcript signed by Benson in 2007 with the line "Carr admitted fault" compared to the Lansing copy, where that section had been deleted. When the enlarged text appeared before the court, the room buzzed with murmurs. Kelly clarified, "This is evidence confirming that Benson recorded Robert Carr's admission of fault, the key witness present at the scene." The subsequent record tampering caused the entire matter to be buried for over 10 years. The prosecution read the Integrity Committee's conclusion, confirming intentional tampering and Benson's personal responsibility for delaying the report. Forensic experts and technicians were called to testify, verifying that all collected data was consistent and could not be fabricated. During the witness examination, Ethan Granger was called to the stand. He stood straight, his voice low and concise as he answered, "I told the truth from the start. They were my neighbors. I never left home that night." Kelly presented telecommunications records, proving his phone had a fixed connection in the residential area all evening, never leaving a 1-mile radius. The judge looked at him, then turned to the prosecution panel, reading a preliminary conclusion: "There is no evidence that Ethan Granger was involved in any criminal activity or concealment. All technical data completely rules out the possibility of his presence at the scene." When the ruling was announced, Ethan stood still, his eyes heavy but calm. After 13 years, he was officially exonerated. The court declared his name recorded in the cleared witness list and required the Marshall PD office to issue a public apology letter. The next part of the hearing focused on determining the final status of the case file. Kelly presented that Robert Carr, who caused the accident and concealed the aftermath, had passed away in 2012, so criminal prosecution was no longer possible. But the investigation results were sufficient to classify the case under Michigan state standards as closed, solved accident with concealment. The judge signed the decree stating, "Scientific evidence conclusively shows the Harlan case was not a disappearance, but a CO gas asphyxiation accident. Carr's concealment was determined to be the cause of the case's misclassification. The official file status is changed from cold case to solved." When the red stamp was pressed onto the decree, Kelly stared at the paper, her breathing quickening. 13 years, hundreds of hours reviewing every page of reports, dozens of nights in storage archives, and finally, it all came down to 2 words: solved. In the afternoon, local media reported briefly, Berrien County Court confirms 2007 Harlan disappearance was an industrial accident. No criminal elements. Case file officially changed to cold case solved. The news ended with an image of Kelly stepping out of the courthouse into the cold April weather, wind flipping the files in her hand, a few pages falling onto the steps, still bearing the line Benson had written years ago. Carr admitted fault. Those blue ink words were finally read aloud in court as the official conclusion to the case Marshall had waited 13 years to hear the truth about. 2 weeks after the hearing at Berrien County Court, Lansing Lab officially released the final forensic conclusion. marking the end of the analysis phase that had lasted over 3 months since the Foundry site excavation. The report was printed on Michigan State Forensic Science Institute letterhead, 64 pages thick, bearing the confirmed signatures of Dr. Michael Hartley and the expert panel. The introduction clearly stated, comprehensive results from bone, fabric, ash, gas, and environmental samples collected at Marshall Foundry, Workshop 4, confirmed the cause of death of the 6 victims. Harlan family members was carbon monoxide asphyxiation in an enclosed environment. The report detailed that carboxyhemoglobin levels in the bone samples reached 68%, 74%, far exceeding the lethal threshold, matching the results of the recreation experiment at Lansing Lab in February. In the scientific explanation section, the forensics team clarified that CO gas from an unvented 1980s generator operating in a confined space could produce concentrations 30 times the safety standard in less than half an hour. Dust samples collected at the scene also contained carbon soot and iron oxide, confirming incomplete combustion of gasoline fuel. Hartley wrote, "Physical and chemical signs are consistent with a CO leak from old industrial equipment causing rapid mass death with no evidence of mechanical injury or violence." The report ruled out intentional arson or homicide, as bone samples showed no cuts, fractures, or external impact. All deformations were due to heat exposure and time-related corrosion. In the subsequent section, the expert team analyzed post-mortem activity based on ash distribution and mixed concrete layers, concluding there was manual intervention to conceal the bodies, identified as actions by an individual present at the scene immediately after the accident. Robert Carr's fingerprints on the lighter and his fuel purchase at the Midway station before the accident provided solid grounds to determine he was the operator of the equipment causing the leak. The comprehensive assessment section stated, "There is no evidence that Carr intentionally caused death. However, operating the generator in an unsafe environment, failing to report the incident, and deliberately concealing the aftermath make him indirectly responsible for the deaths of 6 people." The report also noted that Benson's failure to submit complete samples and record tampering led to misinterpretation of the cause of death, resulting in the case being filed as a disappearance rather than an accident. In the technical appendix, Lansing Lab listed all sample codes used. A 3, a 4, a 6, a 7 were bone samples matching Harlan DNA profiles. B1 was a synthetic fabric fragment with incompletely burned polyester fibers. C2 was an ash sample containing hydrocarbon residue and iron oxide. D5 was a gas sample recovered from the concrete shell, showing trace residual CO. All were stored under -20 degrees Celsius preservation conditions, sealed in the Michigan State Evidence Vault. The final conclusion was presented concisely, using scientific rather than legal language. Cause of death: carbon monoxide, asphyxiation from inhaling generator exhaust in an enclosed space. Incident nature: industrial accident, post-mortem activity, unlawful concealment, not intended to cause additional harm. Indirectly responsible party: Robert Carr, foundry maintenance worker, deceased. Upon receiving the report, Kelly Seidler read each page slowly, underlining key lines, then signed the acknowledgement to transfer it to the official file. She understood that this document was the final piece to close the case, as it not only proved the cause of death, but also clearly defined the scope of responsibility. During an internal press briefing on May 2, Kelly declared to Calhoun County officials, "Lansing Lab confirms 6 victims died from CO asphyxiation. Robert Carr is indirectly responsible, with no intentional elements." The Harlan case is officially reclassified as industrial accident with concealment. The report was sent to state judicial authorities and stored in the Central Lansing Vault under Code FND 2007-2019. When the meeting ended, Kelly stood silently by the window, watching snow melt gradually from building roofs, steam rising like faint smoke. 13 years of investigation, countless forgotten data points, all converged into a single definitive statement: CO asphyxiation. Those dry words were both the final period of the case and a belated acknowledgement of a technical error that took 6 lives, and left an entire town living in suspicion for over a decade. Immediately after Lansing Lab released the final forensic conclusion, the Michigan Department of Justice issued a notice to establish an operational analysis team to compile all investigative errors in the Harlan Foundry case, with the goal of assessing systemic responsibility and drawing lessons for county police departments. The comprehensive report, led by Chief Inspector David Lehman, totaled 147 pages and was completed within 6 weeks. The introduction emphasized, the Harlan Foundry case exemplifies breakdowns in operational procedures between the crime scene phase, storage, and data cross-referencing, leading to a misdirected investigation lasting over a decade. The report categorized the errors into 3 main groups. First, regarding crime scene surveying, the 2007 investigation team did not conduct a comprehensive inspection of Workshop 4, stopping at a superficial survey. Specifically, they did not use gas detection equipment, did not drill core samples from the foundation, and did not analyze the concrete structure, mandatory procedures for cases with burn marks. Instead, Benson concluded early that no signs of crime, causing the suspicious area to be overlooked for 12 years. The report clearly stated, if the scene had been excavated according to proper protocol, bones, ash, and evidence likely would have been discovered within the first week. Second, regarding file storage and preservation, Benson's original file was not entered into the state criminal data management system, but only kept internally at Marshall PD. This violated Rule 5.3 of the 2006 Storage Guidelines, requiring all collective disappearance case files to be digitized within 30 days. Additionally, copies sent to Lansing were edited without confirmation records, leading to loss of original data and content discrepancies. The report pointed out that the edits were performed by users with administrative privileges, bypassing prosecution approval, so the audit system did not log the changes. Conclusion: storage errors were not only due to Benson individually, but to data governance gaps across the entire state system from 2007-2009. Third, regarding suspect targeting, focusing the investigation on Ethan Granger instead of witness Robert Carr was a serious operational error. The Department of Justice analysis showed that Benson was influenced by public pressure and a desire for quick results, leading to biased initial judgments. While Carr was the only person present at the foundry area, holding entry keys and having injuries matching descriptions, his interrogation record was only 4 pages long, less than half of Ethan's. The report assessed, misidentifying the key target led the investigation into a dead end. While evidence against Carr was downplayed, baseless surveillance of Ethan continued for months, damaging personal reputation. The Department of Justice affirmed this as a classic example of tunnel vision, investigating based on initial assumptions and ignoring contradictory data. The final analysis section compiled 13 specific errors, including incomplete site surveying, flaws in evidence sealing procedures, lost witness records, incorrect data entry codes, and failure to update files periodically. All were classified as serious administrative errors without criminal elements. The report also acknowledged the 2019 file recovery and reinvestigation efforts as a significant improvement model for cold case procedures, while proposing amendments to storage regulations to prevent similar cases. In the general assessment section, Lehman wrote, "The Harlan Foundry case reflects conflicts between individual investigators and administrative mechanisms. When the system lacks transparency, information is easily obscured or distorted by subjective intent. The result is delayed justice, even without intentional factors." The report included a 3-point proposal: mandatory full scene inspection within a 200-meter radius for collective disappearance cases, establishment of an automatic electronic file editing audit system, and retraining county investigators on objective judgment skills. Finally, the Department of Justice concluded the operational errors in the Harlan Foundry case did not stem from a single individual, but from structural looseness in the system. Remediation requires synchronized changes from crime scene procedures, storage, to forensic review. When Kelly received the report, She read every line, her eyes lingering on the concluding sentence. The delay of justice was not due to lack of evidence, but because people failed to look closely at what was right in front of them. She gently closed the document, placed it on the table, and realized that those small, seemingly technical mistakes had caused 6 people to be forgotten for 13 years. A gap that, even with the case closed, could not be erased from the history of Michigan's investigative system. On June 28, 2020, after the Michigan Department of Justice completed the operational analysis report and the forensic conclusions were verified, ADA Kelly Seidler officially signed the case closure request for Marshall Foundry. Harlan missing 2007. In the small office on the 3rd floor of the Calhoun County headquarters, the wall clock read exactly 10:17 a.m. when she signed the line case status, solved closed. The nearly 2,000-page file set, including all recovered documents, appraisal results, hearing transcripts, and inspection reports, was neatly arranged into 5 volumes, each wrapped in dark green covers with red final copy stamps. On the first page, she handwrote a note: Cause cow asphyxiation, industrial accident, indirect responsibility, Robert Carr, no criminal elements. Beside it, the line Ethan Granger, cleared witness, was underlined twice, as if to affirm that the man wrongly suspected for over 10 years was finally fully exonerated. Per state regulations, the file was stored in the Central Justice System under Code CC 2007-4821 solved, simultaneously backed up in Lansing's digital vault, and an original copy sent back to Marshall PD for historical archiving. When the official document was stamped, a copy was automatically transferred to Michigan's Cold Case Solved category, marking it as the 214th case resolved since the reinvestigation program began in 2015. Kelly sat silently at her desk, looking at the letterhead, Office of the Prosecuting Attorney, Berrien County, morning light, streaming through the window, highlighting her blue ink signature beneath authorized by ADA Kelly Seidler. A feeling of relief mixed with heaviness washed over her. For nearly a year, she had lived with the case, every detail, every blurry photo, every faded ink record from Benson. Now it all closed not with an indictment, but with the stark truth of an accident, a human error buried in silence. Outside in the hallway, an archivist brought in a large metal box, sealed with an electronic lock, to hold the original file. Kelly stood up, placed each volume inside, locked the lid, and signed the handoff protocol. The box would be transported to Lansing by specialized vehicle the next day. She paused to look at the embossed text on the label. Marshall Foundry case, closed June 28, 2020. The dry sound of the stamp being pressed echoed, ending the file series that had haunted the entire town. In the final internal record, she wrote concisely, based on forensic conclusions, internal investigation and public hearing, the 2007 Marshall Foundry matter is determined to be an industrial accident with subsequent concealment. The file is classified as solved, closed per Article 5.1.2 of Michigan Justice Code. No further investigative activity. After completing the procedures, Kelly left her desk and walked into the hallway, where late afternoon light filtered through frosted glass. The sound of her shoes echoed evenly on the cold stone floor, mingling with the hum of air conditioning and distant phone rings. She stopped at the end of the hallway, looking out the window down at the parking lot where patrol cars sat quietly, covered in a thin layer of dust. For her, this moment was not just the end of a file, but the stopping point of a journey to reclaim forgotten justice. On the corner of her desk, the Department of Justice internal notice printed in large letters, Cold Case Unit, Case Hash M074,821. Status updated to solved. In the space lit only by the blue glow from the computer screen, it displayed the final status line. Upload successful, archive completed. Everything about the Marshall Foundry case was now just a code in the system. But for Kelly, it was the end of a piece of memory, where 13 years of mystery were wrapped into a single word: closed, and justice, though late, finally took concrete form. 1 month after the Marshall Foundry, Harlan missing 2007 inches case was officially closed. The Calhoun County Prosecutor's Office completed the compensation claim file for Ethan Granger under the provisions of the Michigan Actual Innocence Act, a law passed in 2016 to protect individuals wrongfully investigated or detained in criminal cases. Although Ethan was never prosecuted or arrested, he was directly affected by the misdirected investigation that lasted over a decade, being regarded as the prime suspect in a mass disappearance case with his personal reputation and livelihood severely damaged. Kelly Seidler personally signed the official document transferring the file to the Michigan Department of Treasury for review and disbursement under the category of investigative error leading to civil consequences. In the attached document, she clearly stated, Ethan Granger was misdirected in the investigation for 12 years, with no evidence of guilt, fully exonerated by forensic results, and the Berrien County Court's decision in April 2020. Request application of Section 7, Subsection 3. Administrative compensation for mental and economic damages. The Department of Treasury received the file on July 31, 2020, under case number M4821 Comp. The Review Board, consisting of representatives from the Department of Justice, the State Treasury, and the State Attorney's Office, held 3 consecutive sessions to assess the damages. According to the appraisal results, Ethan lost his job at the garage due to ostracism in 2008. His average income dropped by more than 60% during the 2008-2014 period, and he was denied credit and employment contracts due to his name being in the unverified suspects database. An independent report by an economic expert indicated that total financial losses were estimated at $412,000, not including mental damages and indirect legal costs. Based on the compensation framework, the Department of Treasury approved a payment of $500,000, including a principal amount of $350,000 for material damages and $150,000 for reputational losses to be paid in a lump sum. On August 12, the Department of Treasury representative announced the decision at the state headquarters in Lansing. In the minutes, the spokesperson stated, Ethan Granger is fully recognized as innocent under the Actual Innocence Act provisions. The state of Michigan is responsible for compensating for the damages he suffered due to the prolonged misdirected investigation. The payment is classified as exoneration compensation, Category B. When signing the receipt minutes, Ethan only said briefly, I don't want anyone else to wait 12 years to hear the words innocent. That afternoon, he received the compensation check at the Lansing Financial Office, along with an official apology letter signed by the Attorney General and the current Marshall PD Sheriff. In the letter, the opening line read, On behalf of the state of Michigan, we apologize for the damages you endured due to errors in the 2007 investigation process. Your file has been removed from all criminal databases and stored in the cleared witnesses category. A copy of the letter was sent to local media outlets, marking a rare event in the state's judicial history where an individual was exonerated and compensated without ever being convicted. Kelly attended the decision handover ceremony, standing silently at the back of the room as Ethan shook hands with the officials. She recalled the long years he lived under suspicion, avoiding contact with neighbors, and the old garage door once plastered with newspaper clippings about the neighbor's suspect. Now the Granger Auto Repair sign was re-erected with fresh paint, and beneath it hung a small bronze plaque, Exonerated Citizen, Marshall, Michigan. Administratively, the compensation file was marked executed, settled by the Department of Treasury, and transferred to the civil justice system with the notation non-contested. An electronic backup copy was sent back to Kelly and the Marshall PD records room to be stored with the original case file, accompanied by the note, Ethan Granger, compensated and cleared. In the final internal record, Kelly wrote, compensation completed. Ethan Granger is officially recognized as innocent, his name removed from all suspect lists. File transferred to the Michigan Department of Treasury for storage. When the final document was signed, Afternoon light shone through the large glass window, reflecting off the words, "Actual Innocence Act" on the cover page. 4 simple words that were enough to close 13 years of errors and restore honor to a man once caught in the orbit of a case he himself never understood why he was mentioned in. In September 2020, 3 months after the Marshall Foundry case was officially closed and Ethan Granger's compensation was finalized, the Michigan Department of Justice held a large-scale wrap-up meeting in Lansing to evaluate the full impact of the case on the state's criminal investigation system. The 2-day meeting brought together more than 100 representatives from police departments, forensic labs, medical examiner offices, and cold case units across the state. The opening report presented by Chief Inspector David Lehman emphasized the Harlan Foundry case is a textbook example of procedural misconduct and archival system stagnation, but it is also an example of the resilience and improvement of processes when technology and transparency are prioritized. The Department of Justice determined that the case would be used as the primary training material for all criminal investigator training courses from 2021-2025. A 320-page internal monograph titled Forensic Failures, Marshall Case was compiled, with limited distribution to law enforcement agencies and specialized training facilities. This document compiled the entire process from the recording of the disappearance to case closure, including detailed analysis of each error at every level: crime scene investigation, file management, forensic analysis, and information handling. In the introduction, the Attorney General wrote, "No case should drag on for over a decade just because we overlooked small facts. Marshall Foundry is proof that when data is forgotten, justice is buried with it." The first section of the document, Operational Errors, outlined 10 major failures, including not expanding the full crime scene search, misassessing the fire area, not sending sufficient samples, and particularly not fully recording witness Carr's statement. The second section, Archival Breakdown, detailed how files were altered, data lost, and the consequences when the storage system lacked change control mechanisms. The third section, Reconstruction Success, focused on the 2019-2020 reinvestigation phase, illustrating the combination of DNA profiling technology, telecommunications data, and 3D crime scene reconstruction as evidence of modern investigative advancements. The Department of Justice also included 15 technical recommendations derived from the case, such as mandating CO gas trace storage in suspected arson cases, deploying portable environmental sensors, and implementing automated file data auditing processes. During the conference, many veteran investigators admitted that without the 2019 statewide review, the Marshall Foundry case would have remained frozen in the cold case storage forever. One of the most highlighted sections in the document was the chapter Human Factor in Failure, which clearly outlined the impact of subjective psychology, bias, and public pressure on the investigation process. In it, Harold Benson's story was analyzed as a prime example of decision under institutional fear, when a commander chose silence to avoid damaging the agency's image. Kelly Seidler was cited multiple times as a symbol of data integrity-based investigation methods. One passage read, "From the moment she took over the case, Seidler did not seek a perpetrator, but sought the truth. That is the principle every investigator must remember." At the end of the document, the Department of Justice emphasized that the Marshall Foundry case had changed the way the cold case system operated in the state. A series of other suspicious cases were reviewed, with a total of 67 files reopened in the following year, using similar cross-analysis processes for DNA and phone data. A technical appendix included a Foundry case simulation video used as illustrative material for the Forensic Integrity 101 Inches course. In the wrap-up session, the Attorney General stated, "No one can redo the past, but we can ensure that another Marshall never happens." Kelly Seidler, invited as an honorary guest, sat quietly in the back row as images of the old Foundry site were projected on the large screen, collapsed walls, cracked concrete floors, dim yellow light covering the black ash in Benson's final photograph. The Forensic Failures, Marshall case document was subsequently circulated internally to all police units in the state, marking the transformation from an investigative mistake into a systemic lesson. In the conclusion, the words were simple but sharp. No evidence is useless if the investigator is patient enough to reread it. Marshall paid the price for that impatience. Let that price not be paid a second time. After the Department of Justice completed the wrap-up report and released the forensic failures, Marshall case document, all case files, physical evidence, and digital data related to the case were permanently transferred to the Lansing Evidence Archive, Michigan's most modern judicial storage center, specializing in preserving closed or solved closed case files. The handover took place on October 15, 2020, under the supervision of representatives from the Department of Justice, the Lansing Forensic Lab, and the State Criminal Archives Bureau. 5 original file boxes were sealed with electronic locks, affixed with yellow security tape, labeled FND 2007 Archive Class A, and accompanied by 2 hard drives containing SHA-256 encrypted digital data. Everything was transported by specialized vehicle from Calhoun to Lansing in 3 hours, with police escort. Upon arrival at the center, the intake process was conducted rigorously. Each box was scanned, photographed, and entered into the electronic evidence management system. The storage area is located deep in the basement of the Lansing complex, with 1-meter-thick concrete walls, temperature and humidity maintained at standard levels of 18 degrees Celsius and 45%. Among thousands of cold case boxes in the state, the Marshall Foundry 2007 inches box was placed in row A12, shelf 4, slot 47. A small metal plaque attached in front was engraved with Harlan Family Case, 2007 Solved Accident Michigan DOJ. Inside the box, all physical evidence was arranged in its original order: nylon bags containing bone fragments, fabric samples, ash, Zippo lighter, Harold Benson's notebook, USB drive, and recovered crime scene photos. Each item was wrapped in moisture-proof bags, with identification tags and QR codes linking to electronic files. Digital data, including crime scene videos, photo scans, forensic reports, and 3D reconstruction models, was stored in the Lansing Evidence Archive's Forensic Digital Repository, with access permissions for 3 levels: prosecutors, forensic examiners, and Department of Justice inspectors. By regulation, this data will be preserved for at least 50 years from the date of closure, after which it may be considered for historical archiving. All electronic copies are periodically backed up to the internal cloud system, with automated change detection algorithms to prevent recurrences of incidents like the 2008 alterations. Notably, Lansing has implemented internal blockchain technology. Every access or data modification automatically records timestamps and user identities, creating an unalterable verification chain. In the center's display area, there is a small section dedicated to prominent cold case files. A transparent plexiglass panel is engraved with Marshall Foundry, Harlan Family, 2007-2020, below which is an excerpt from the conclusion report. Cause of death: CO gas asphyxiation, industrial accident, unlawful cover-up. Case closed after 13 years. Visitors can use touchscreens to view 3D crime scene diagrams, archival photos, and investigation process simulations. All data has witness names redacted per privacy regulations. In the internal storage section, a special record titled Recovered Benson Notes is marked with a red frame. This is the only document fully recovered from the Foundry evidence box, now regarded as evidence of the pre-digitalization manual investigation era. Kelly Seidler, during the handover, signed the final minutes with the words, "To preserve not the failure, but the lesson." After signing, she looked through the clear glass of the vault, where white LED lights reflected off hundreds of neatly arranged file boxes. Each box a closed story, a fragment of Justice's memory. The sound of the vault door closing echoed down the long hallway, the fingerprint scanner's green light signaling the process was complete. In the central database, the new status appeared on the screen. Case hash M074,821. Archived successfully. Lansing Evidence Archive status, solved. Permanent record. With that status line, the Marshall Foundry case officially entered a new phase, no longer an investigation, but an archive, preserved in the silence and cold white light of the storage room, as an irrepeatable part of Michigan's judicial memory. On October 30, 2020, the Lansing Evidence Archive issued an internal notice confirming that the Marshall Foundry hash M074,821 file had officially completed the archiving process and was recorded in the state's cold case resolved category. The file closure minutes were signed by representatives from the Department of Justice, the Criminal Archives Bureau, and the Lansing Lab, confirming that all physical evidence had been permanently sealed, with no further prosecutorial or testing value. In the center's basement storage, the final evidence box was sealed with silver tape, labeled Final Archive, Solved Case No Further Examination, and placed in its fixed position in row A12, with digital copies stored on the state's secure data system. The final status line displayed on the file management screen, case hash M074,821. Closed 2019 Archive 2020 status, solved. Per procedure, this file was classified as Level I, to be retained for 50 years from the confirmation date, with all access or public disclosure requests requiring Attorney General approval. In Lansing's record log, the file description was reduced to 3 lines. Marshall Foundry, Harlan family. CO, gas asphyxiation accident. Unlawful cover-up. Responsible party deceased. All prints, photos, and digital data were cross-checked one final time before the system locked editing rights. At 5:42 p.m., the scan signal completed. The indicator light changed from yellow to green, marking the moment the file was sealed. The archive representative read the final confirmation, M074,821, resolved and archived. Outside in the hallway, Kelly Seidler and the Lansing technical team stood witnessing the final procedure through the safety glass. No one spoke, only the dry click of the electronic lock mechanism echoed in the cold space. On the central screen, the text scrolled slowly. Marshall Foundry case, cold case resolved, Michigan DOJ. A small file containing the investigation summary was transferred to the state's public data repository, where citizens could check the case status but not view details. In the statewide cold case management system, code M074,821 was colored blue, the symbol for a closed file. It was the 214th case resolved since the reinvestigation program began. That evening, as she left Lansing, Kelly glanced back at the silent archive building against the gray sky, golden lights illuminating the steel-engraved words on the facade. Justice preserved is justice served. 13 years after that snowy night in Marshall, everything had become memory. The Harlan file, from an unsolved disappearance, now rested silently in Michigan's cold case resolved category, completely and permanently closed. The story of the Marshall Foundry hash M074,821 case is not just a 13-year journey to rediscover forgotten truth, but also a reflection of how the American justice system confronts its own limitations between accountability, errors, and the ability to make amends. Details like Sheriff Benson altering files to avoid reputational impact, or witness Ethan Granger being wrongly suspected for decades due to biased investigation, show that justice is not always the result of fairness, but sometimes the result of courage, the courage to look back, the courage to correct mistakes. In today's American society, where information spreads quickly and public opinion exerts great pressure, this story reminds us that truth requires time and integrity more than speed. The Michigan Department of Justice's acknowledgement of errors, issuance of the forensic failures, Marshall case document, and implementation of technical reforms are proof of a justice system capable of self-correction, capable of learning from its own failures, something that every individual, organization, and society needs. The lesson learned is not just for investigators, but for all of us. Don't rush to judgment without sufficient facts. Don't let silence or fear bury the truth. Each person has a responsibility to keep information transparent, from protecting evidence, storing data, to not letting bias cloud reason. In America today, where technology allows us to remember everything but people easily forget the value of truth, the Marshall Foundry case reminds us that justice is not just the final verdict, but an unending journey of seeking and protecting what is right, even if it costs time and faith. Thank you for following the story of Marshall Foundry M0744821, the long journey to rediscover forgotten truth and justice in America. Please subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing to explore other real cases where the past still has stories that need to be told.